Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Suzanne Sills. On Sunday, November 13, 2016, Dr. Scott Sills, a renowned fertility specialist in California, called 911 to report that his wife, Suzanne, had fallen down the stairs. When he found her, she showed no signs of life. Scott activated the speakerphone for the call. The dispatcher guided him on how to provide first aid, and he followed the instructions while their children were nearby. He claimed that Suzanne showed signs of life after the first aid was administered. When the paramedics arrived, Scott stated that she was alive. However, the paramedics suspected that he was mistaken because she was already deceased. The police were then notified, and several officers arrived at the house. They noticed bruises on Suzanne's neck that appeared to be from strangulation, indicating that her injuries could not have been caused by a simple fall down the stairs. Scott told the police that Susan wanted to walk her dog, as she did every morning. He suggested that after she fell down the stairs, the dogs might have pulled her scarf, leading to her suffocation and leaving marks on her body. However, the police suspected that the dogs could not have caused Suzanne's death in this way, so they concluded that she had been murdered. They especially believed that Scott could be the real killer. To investigate further, they first looked at Scott's testimony. Was it possible that Suzanne fell down the stairs and suffered fatal injuries? This seemed plausible since the stairs were over 4 meters high and very steep. However, Suzanne was a 45-year-old woman in excellent physical condition and had always been careful, so a fall seemed unlikely. During their examination, the police discovered injuries all over Suzanne's body. Her face was covered in bruises, and both her arms and legs had wounds that could not have resulted from a fall. Additionally, items found near her body raised further questions, as they did not align with Scott's account. Meanwhile, he appeared surprisingly calm, even with his wife's body lying dead in the house. Despite the suspicions surrounding him, Scott cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his house and providing all necessary information and DNA samples. Meanwhile, one of the officers began questioning Scott and Suzanne's children. They had 2 children, 12-year-old Eric and his twin sister, Mary Catherine. Both children shared that their mother, Suzanne, had been unwell the day before, suffering from migraines, which she experienced periodically. The pain was quite debilitating for her. During these episodes, she would retreat to a dark room, lie down, and remain quiet. Next to her body was a saucepan, an item she often kept close during these times in case she felt nauseous. Suzanne would place it near her bed, and when she woke up in the morning and decided to take the dogs for a walk, she would bring it with her to the kitchen. An empty pill bottle found nearby contained painkillers that Suzanne used to manage her migraines. Her husband, Scott, described their relationship as warm, and both children confirmed that their parents shared a deeply understanding and loving bond. They rarely fought and were generally seen as very positive individuals. With information from family members, the investigators were able to piece together what happened before the tragedy. On Saturday evening, November 12, 2016, Suzanne went to sleep in Mary's room, which was the quietest and darkest place, to manage her pain. Around midnight, Scott checked on Suzanne to see how she was doing. Since Suzanne was already asleep, Mary chose to sleep in her parents' room instead. Detectives discovered a heartfelt note Mary left for her mother on the door, expressing her love and wishing her a speedy recovery. Eric said that at around 4 a.m., he woke up after hearing an argument between his parents, Suzanne and Scott. He was resting in the next room, listening to the loud and seemingly annoyed voices. He also did not hear any other unusual noises. After about 5 minutes, Scott decided to sleep in the main bedroom, where Mary was sleeping. When Scott entered, Mary woke up and asked what was happening. He explained that he and Suzanne had argued over a work-related email, assuring her that there was no need to worry. Scott later told the police that when he checked on Suzanne at 4 a.m., she was working on her laptop. He tried to convince her to go to bed because she was feeling unwell due to a migraine, but she refused and continued working, which led to tension between the two. Eventually, the family went back to sleep. They woke up at 6:30 a.m. Scott suggested to Mary that they should go swimming. However, when she came out of the bedroom, she found her mother unresponsive at the bottom of the stairs. Her mother was lying on the floor with a long scarf around her neck, and there was a saucepan nearby. Mary screamed and called for her father, Scott. Scott noted that Susan often used this scarf to wrap around her head during migraines. This scarf belonged to Mary. However, there were questions about whether the dogs accidentally knocked her down and caused her to strangle herself. Could she have fallen in such a way that a scarf wrapped around her neck, leading to her death? These scenarios seemed unlikely, and suspicious details began to emerge. For example, if she was carrying an empty saucepan with her when she fell down the stairs, why did no one hear the noise and wake up in the early morning hours? The saucepan would have made noise hitting the tiled floor and stairs, so it couldn't have fallen silently. Additionally, it was odd that she had a scarf on a warm day. The police began to suspect her husband Scott, especially since a cut was found on his forehead. Scott also had a large bruise on his arm. He suggested that he got these injuries while repairing his car in the garage the day before. According to his statement, his son, Eric, assisted him with the repairs. However, there was a contradiction. Eric claimed that his father was not injured that day. They had left the garage together and entered the house, and during that time, Eric did not notice any injuries on his father. Eric also informed investigators that he saw his mother, Suzanne, putting the dogs in a cage a few hours before her death. Normally, after this, the dogs would go to sleep. Eric was puzzled as to why his mother would take them for a walk so early in the morning, especially when she seemed to be in a weakened state. While investigating Mary's bedroom, where Susan had spent the night, authorities discovered suspicious bloodstains on the curtains, wall, and bedside table. Mary asserted that when her mother entered the room, it was entirely clean and free of blood. Scott claimed that the bloodstains were old, from cuts he had made while replacing mosquito screens on his windows last spring. However, the stains appeared fresh. Despite the presence of the bloodstains, this evidence was insufficient to charge or arrest Scott. Then, Suzanne's body was sent for forensic examination, and officers left the house after 4 days. Although the autopsy was performed, the forensic expert could not provide clear answers. The examination revealed multiple injuries on the body, which could have been caused by either a fall down the stairs or physical assault. Strangulation was also a possibility. The most severe injury was a fracture at the base of the neck. Additionally, broken blood vessels in the eyes were found, a typical sign of strangulation. However, experts could not determine for certain whether the injuries were accidental or indicative of criminal activity. A more thorough analysis of all evidence was needed, which could take months, and no one wanted to rush, given the complexity and contentious nature of the case. The forensic experts concentrated on examining additional evidence gathered from the house, particularly the blood, which appeared suspicious. They also sent traces of blood and other items, including a phone and a laptop, for analysis. The Suzanne family had limited interaction with their neighbors, as they worked long hours and rarely engaged with others. Consequently, no one could provide useful information about what was happening inside their home. Additionally, no one reported hearing anything unusual during the night or in the morning. Investigators used communication tools to gather more information. This helped them identify people who had close relationships with Suzanne and Scott, thereby finding witnesses who could shed light on the motive for the incident. They spoke with students whom Scott taught, who described him as cheerful and kind. He always attended class dressed in an elegant three-piece suit. Some students who had a lot of interaction with him said he was the sweetest person. One girl recounted how he helped her financially multiple times when she couldn't afford lunch or a taxi home due to her family's financial struggles. Scott showed her great compassion. From a young age, it seemed that Scott had great potential. After finishing high school, he was accepted into law school and later pursued medical studies. His intelligence, determination, and hard work enabled him to become a successful specialist in reproductive issues. His work led him to meet Suzanne. She came to his clinic because she was struggling to conceive with her first husband. At that time, Suzanne had just graduated with a master's degree in business administration. She shared her fertility issues with Scott, who then took charge of her treatment. Over time, their professional relationship developed into a romantic one. Eventually, Suzanne decided to file for divorce. Suzanne was witty, cheerful, and very attractive, making her a loyal friend and a wonderful life partner. At a reunion of their business school, Scott attended with Suzanne, and they appeared to be a happy couple. So, when they announced their engagement, no one was surprised. Scott successfully addressed Suzanne's fertility issues through IVF, and she became pregnant, later giving birth to twins. Suzanne admired her husband greatly. She considered him a genius and an expert who could help many women. Thanks to Suzanne's efforts and her husband Scott's expertise, they opened a clinic together in April 2015. Suzanne played a crucial role in building and managing the business, while her husband focused on the medical procedures. Through this venture, they became very wealthy and purchased an expensive house in a prestigious part of the city. Scott developed an interest in luxury cars, and the family indulged in a lavish lifestyle. By this time, Scott had gained fame as a specialist. He was recognized due to his frequent television appearances. He authored several books and regularly contributed to professional publications, earning a reputation as one of the top experts in his field. It seemed that he and his wife Suzanne worked well together. However, shortly before the incident, they experienced disagreements over a photograph that Suzanne posted on her social media. Afterward, friends noticed tension between them, especially when Suzanne's relatives and friends learned about the death and the circumstances surrounding it. Many believed the incident was suspicious. By the time detectives began interviewing witnesses, several had already met with Scott. They found that he did not want to talk about the incident, which made the investigators even more suspicious. They now increasingly believe it was a deliberate murder. During this time, forensic experts visited Scott's home multiple times. They observed that he did not express any regret and appeared to be unemotional. While he often praised Suzanne as a talented businesswoman, he rarely acknowledged her qualities as a loving wife and mother. It seemed that his affection for her was more about their business partnership than about love. The morning after Suzanne was declared dead, Scott went to work as though nothing had happened, surprising the entire staff. Everything appeared the same as any other morning, and it seemed he wasn't troubled by the situation at all. Contrary to what everyone expected, he didn't take time off to grieve for his wife. The clinic's manager and several employees spoke with detectives, noting that Scott avoided discussions about Suzanne. Furthermore, Scott quickly began to change his appearance. Before Suzanne's death, he looked like an average balding man. But afterward, he underwent a hair transplant and now had a thick head of hair. His activity on social media also increased. He maintained his personal page without mentioning any sorrow over his wife's passing. In fact, he started going to the gym, dining out, and dressing well, giving the impression that he was looking for a new girlfriend and was indifferent to his wife's fate. Soon after, Scott started dating someone, and their relationship progressed quickly. However, the police felt they still lacked evidence. They needed to gather all the information and find new incriminating details. In 2018, the coroner's office provided the results of a thorough analysis. The forensic expert determined that the cause of Suzanne's death was strangulation, which left marks on her neck post-mortem. Additionally, DNA tests revealed a mix of blood from Suzanne and Scott in Mary's room, indicating a struggle and suggesting that Suzanne was attacked by Scott. On August 8, 2018, Nearly 2 years after Suzanne's death, detectives visited Scott's house and directly asked him if he had killed his wife. He became visibly nervous, sweating and adopting a defensive posture. Scott denied the allegations regarding the blood, claiming he had injured himself while fixing the mosquito net on the door. However, this raised the question of how his wife's blood ended up there. Meanwhile, Mary stated that she had not seen any bloodstains until the police arrived and found her mother deceased. Although there was clear evidence of the crime, the officers were not in a rush to file charges. They decided that more evidence was needed, including examining Suzanne's phone. They believed that social media could provide important clues. After investigating, they discovered some disturbing details. Suzanne often had harsh reactions towards her husband, Scott. About 3 months before her death, she expressed feeling trapped in their relationship and wanted to end it. After that, she occasionally told her husband that they were not a good match. A month before her death, Suzanne confided in a friend about having a difficult relationship with Scott and her desire to leave him. However, she felt he was holding her back due to their joint business. According to her friend, a photo she had posted became a significant issue in their relationship. Scott was unhappy about the photo. When the police checked Scott's phone, they found a screenshot of this picture from August 30, 2016. It appeared that this revelation became the motive for the murder, fueled by jealousy. The police discovered that the day after Suzanne's death, Scott attempted to collect a $250,000 payment from her life insurance policy. However, his claim was denied because of suspicions of murder. On April 25, 2019, nearly 2 years after her death, Scott was arrested for the alleged murder. He was apprehended while preparing for another surgery and was detained, with bail set at $1 million. He quickly paid the bail and was released, waiting for trial. Then, a woman reported to the police that she had dated Scott while Suzanne was still alive. They initially met through social media, and it appeared he was very interested in her. However, he soon ended the relationship. A woman shared a text message she received from Scott 2 weeks after Suzanne's death, in which he expressed his desire to rekindle their relationship as he was now single. There are several motives for why Scott could have killed Suzanne: to gain money, to avoid dividing their assets in a potential divorce, or simply to remove her as an obstacle to dating other women. However, Scott's attorney argued that the text messages were simply a father's way of trying to find a new mother for his 2 children. In November 2023, 7 years after Suzanne's death, Scott Sills faced trial. Cameras were prohibited in the prosecutor's office but allowed in the courtroom. Scott appeared uncomfortable with the media attention, as he had faced significant scrutiny throughout this ordeal. He lost his medical license and seemed to be struggling emotionally. According to the prosecutor's office, on November 13, 2016, Scott attacked Suzanne at 4 a.m. when their son, Eric, heard the argument. He physically assaulted her multiple times and ultimately strangled her to death. He then staged the scene to make it look like she had fallen down the stairs, and he went to sleep, pretending not to know what happened the next morning. Despite this, Scott's lawyer presented a defense, indicating that he was determined to fight the charges. The attorney stated that Susan woke up that morning, tried to go to the kitchen to get a pan, and continued her daily activities. However, due to the effects of her migraine medication and her general weakness, she fell down the stairs and was injured by the family dogs. The dogs interpreted the situation as a game, tugging on the ends of the scarf around Suzanne's neck. As they pulled in different directions, they inadvertently strangled her, causing her to die relatively quickly. In an unexpected turn, Mary came forward to support Scott. She stated that when she left her room, she saw the dogs pulling on the scarf around Suzanne's neck, but initially did not comprehend the situation. She admitted that she had not spoken up sooner because she was just a child at the time of her mother's tragic death. Mary explained that she didn't realize the importance of the information regarding the scarf. She noted that they removed the scarf while providing first aid to her mother, which is why it ended up away from the body. The defense tested the scarf for dog DNA, which came back positive. Additionally, toxicology tests indicated that Suzanne had a mixture of sedatives and painkillers in her system, making her muscles difficult to control and overly relaxed after sleeping. In the days leading up to her fall, she had poor nutrition and felt weak, which could have contributed to an accidental fall that resulted in a neck injury, potentially leading to suffocation without help. The defense argued that the dogs played only a minor role in the case. They claimed that even if the dogs hadn't dragged the scarf, Suzanne could still have died since no one heard her fall or called for emergency assistance. However, the prosecution found this explanation unconvincing, stating that the noise from her fall should have been noticeable. They believed that Scott used the scarf to strangle her. In contrast, Mary claims that her mother, Suzanne, often uses the scarf to keep warm when she has a migraine, which helps her mother feel better. However, the prosecutor's office made its strongest argument that during their search of the house, they found no evidence that Susan had been on the stairs. If she had fallen down 4 meters of steps, there would likely have been blood or DNA traces, but none were found. The prosecution argued that Scott himself moved the body to make it look like a fall. They emphasized the positioning of Suzanne's body. Although the 911 dispatcher instructed Scott to perform CPR on a flat surface, when paramedics arrived, Suzanne's leg was still on the stairs. This indicated that he was not genuinely trying to help her, but was only pretending. Furthermore, the prosecution maintained that Scott had a strong motive, as a photo posted by Suzanne had sparked jealousy and anger. The jury testified in the 3-week trial. Ultimately, they had to reach a verdict. After hearing closing arguments from both the prosecution and defense and deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found 58-year-old Scott Sills not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder. This means that Scott, a man who has helped many women, has now been convicted of murdering his wife. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Upon hearing the verdict, Mary broke down in tears in the courtroom. She was heartbroken at the thought of losing her mother, while her father would spend the rest of his life in prison. She claimed that there was a mistake in the trial and was determined to seek justice with her defense attorney, but the sentence remained unchanged. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lucy Letby. Today, we will discuss the case of a baby killer who was dubbed the most brutal in British forensic history. This case began in 2015. In the UK, about 700,000 babies are born each year, with around 3,000 admitted to the hospital in Chester, located in northwest England. The following year, from June 2015 to June 2016, staff in the neonatal department noticed a sharp increase in infant mortality rates. This troubling trend was occurring in the wards where premature and ill babies were treated. Doctors sensed that something was wrong, and internal investigations did not uncover any medical explanations for the deaths. The high infant mortality rate prompted police to investigate the neonatal unit, where they uncovered disturbing circumstances surrounding several deaths. After an extensive investigation, a young nurse who had worked at the hospital for many years was arrested. The investigation has revealed disturbing details about the incidents, leaving the families of the dead children devastated by the news. 5 years after the first child's death, police contacted the family and others, forcing the parents to hear heartbreaking details about what had happened to their child and testify against the suspect. In court, numerous witness statements were presented. The children were murdered using various methods. One was poisoned with insulin by a nurse, while another suffered severe liver damage. However, the most common method used was injecting air into the bloodstream, which created an air bubble that blocked blood flow. This technique was particularly insidious as it left little evidence, making it hard to prove it was lethal. The motive behind the nurse's actions remains unclear. The police determined that she gained knowledge about blood flow from the courses she took to enhance her qualifications. They warned her that injecting air into a vein could be extremely dangerous. Soon after completing these courses, a tragic incident occurred where a baby died after being injected with air through an intravenous drip. In this case, it was difficult to establish the exact cause of death. The parents of the baby described his condition as critical. They would visit the hospital every morning and leave in the evening, hoping for his recovery. However, one night his condition suddenly worsened, and the doctors believed he had no chance of survival. This led the parents to make the heartbreaking choice to disconnect their newborn from life support. The nurse killer worked another night shift the following day and attempted to harm the sister of the initial victim. Fortunately, the girl was able to escape unharmed. The third incident involved a child known in court as Baby D, where air was intentionally introduced into the child's body. This incident took place just 2 weeks after the first one, in June 2015. Notably, Baby D was a full-term infant, unlike the other victims who were all premature and receiving specialized care until they could survive without life support. Despite being full-term, Baby D had some health complications. The mother went through a long and difficult labor, after which the baby had difficulty breathing. The baby should not have been in the neonatal department, but due to a tragic coincidence, he ended up there. The baby's mother was the first to testify in court against the nurse who was suspected of murder. In her statement, she described seeing the nurse leaning over their child's crib during the day. Although it seemed like the nurse was doing nothing, her wandering around looked very suspicious. That night, the parents were awakened by a nurse who informed them that their child had suddenly become very ill. When they arrived at the ward, the doctor attempted to resuscitate Baby D, performing life-saving measures repeatedly until he realized the baby had died. This all happened right in front of the baby's mother and father. The investigation revealed that during the night shift, the suspect gave 3 lethal injections to the child. After Baby D died, doctors observed an unusual rash on the victim's stomach. Small purple spots that the medical staff could not identify. They were unsure of its significance. Later, this distinctive rash appeared on many victims of the nurse killer. Interestingly, the spots appeared briefly and then vanished completely. One of the victims, known as Baby E, was part of a set of twins, and their mother also testified in court. The twins were diagnosed with a minor illness that required treatment in a medical facility. While the mother was with her husband, she began experiencing contractions 50 kilometers away from the hospital. They rushed to the hospital, where she had a cesarean section, and the newborns were immediately taken to the neonatal department. The mother stayed in the hospital to recover from the surgery. Her husband left for work, and on August 3rd, she went to check on her twin babies to make sure everything was all right. She followed her regular hygiene routine by wiping their heads and necks and changing their diapers. A few hours later, around 9 p.m., she heard her son crying loudly and rushed to his side. When she got there, she noticed blood around his mouth. The nurse responsible for the care of the babies was nearby in the department at that time. It was later determined that the mother almost caught the nurse in the act of trying to harm her baby, which scared the nurse away. However, the mother didn't have enough time to fully comprehend the danger her child was in. The mother screamed for help, prompting another nurse to escort her to the ward to help her calm down. Meanwhile, the baby started to bleed heavily, and the bleeding could not be stopped. The doctors fought to save the baby's life for about an hour, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Similar to previous cases, the baby had a suspicious rash on his body. The attending physician noted the rash recurred around the time of death and commented that he had never seen anything like it before. Determined to uncover the mystery behind these alarming occurrences, the doctor began researching medical reference books. He discovered that the rash was linked to a blockage of the pulmonary artery. This revelation marked a significant turning point for the medical staff, as they were now closer to solving the mysterious deaths of infants in the clinic. During the trial, the doctor admitted that he only fully understood the situation months after the deaths of the children. The doctors at the clinic became increasingly concerned about the cases involving children. It was clear that something troubling was happening, but no one suspected that it could be caused by someone meant to safeguard the children's lives. One doctor, who determined that all the children had suffered from pulmonary embolism, began to investigate further. He soon noticed a troubling pattern. Every time a child died, a nurse named Lucy Letby was on duty and had been seen by the parents before the deaths. It was hard to believe. No one could imagine that someone as kind as Lucy could be responsible for such actions. Lucy Letby was born on January 4, 1990. She grew up in Harris Ford and attended Elston High School and Hartford College. A childhood friend said she was a dedicated student who had wanted to be a nurse since she was a child. Lucy pursued her passion for caring for newborns by studying nursing at the University of Chester. During her studies, she worked as a nurse for 3 years, completing an internship at Liverpool Women's Hospital. The whole family was proud of her high academic achievements and believed that she wanted to help children. In 2010, Lucy started working as a nurse in the neonatal department of the hospital where many tragic events occurred. Her family described her as someone who loved saving the lives of babies, witnessing their recovery, and supporting their families. She was actively involved in charity work and participated in fundraising for sick children. Because of her kind and gentle personality, many found it hard to believe that she could be involved in the deaths of children. However, evidence suggested that Lucy was the one who injected air into the bloodstream of her young victims. Doctors took time to investigate additional evidence to confirm their suspicions about Lucy's involvement, as there were many uncertainties. Ultimately, everyone agreed that Lucy should be reported. The head physician became aware of the neonatal department's concerns regarding Lucy. However, that evening, the management was preoccupied with their own issues and overlooked the seriousness of the situation. They even pressured doctors not to cause panic, fearing that it would draw unwanted public attention to the problem. The hospital's reputation was at stake, and management was worried about the potential consequences. At this point, the doctors had repeatedly asked the hospital management to take action against the nurse they suspected of being a killer. Unfortunately, their concerns were completely ignored, and no one took them seriously. Their fellow nurses were also confused, unsure whether to go to the police, as they found it hard to believe that one of their own could commit such terrible acts. This left the doctors in a difficult position, forcing them to step back and reevaluate all they knew. They were focused on the alarming trend of healthy or nearly healthy children, who had been born prematurely without any clear reasons, continuing to die. These babies did not respond to resuscitation efforts, and in most cases, developed a mysterious rash that vanished after death. Ultimately, they decided that the best course of action was to carry out a police investigation to find out if Lucy was responsible in these situations. As a result, the hospital staff contacted the police directly. The doctor who initially reported the concern stated that he took all necessary steps to protect the children in his care. However, he was unable to communicate with upper management, and any delay could jeopardize the lives of other infants. So he decided to call the police. Police quickly began investigating these horrific crimes. As the case stalled, rumors started circulating within the hospital. It became evident, even from a brief examination, that Lucy was connected to the deceased children, as these incidents only occurred during her shifts. She was consistently present when the children faced difficulties. This information spread rapidly among the medical staff. Regardless of whether the rumors were proven true, tensions within the team escalated. Lucy faced open accusations, and she was subjected to significant pressure, yet she maintained her innocence regarding the baby's deaths. Lucy believes they are trying to blame her for the failures of other doctors. This situation began in July 2015. Later, a group of doctors emerged who attempted to blame a nurse for the deaths of newborns. They voiced their concerns, and during the trial, Lucy accused them of conspiring to hold her responsible for the deaths in the neonatal unit. Lucy openly made these accusations because she believed they were trying to cover up serious violations connected to hospital management, which could potentially implicate many staff members and administrators in the deaths of the infants. In reality, doctors were investigating the causes of the newborn deaths. They expressed their disbelief that a nurse, whose role was to care for and protect children, could intentionally administer lethal injections. However, as more evidence was reviewed, the connections became increasingly evident. After thoroughly examining the situation, the doctors concluded that the only possible explanation for the deaths was the introduction of air, which was noted to be associated with unexplained spots. The major challenge was that lethal injections leave almost no evidence, making it extremely difficult to prove they were the cause of death. The only potential evidence against Lucy involved 2 cases of insulin poisoning in children. However, at the time the tests were conducted, these cases had not yet been evaluated. In the past, it was extremely difficult to determine these tests. However, the seriousness of the situation required the doctors and investigators to be diligent in gathering evidence, as it could prove Lucy's guilt in an extremely disturbing crime. They were finally able to obtain blood samples taken 8 months before the trial began. The 2 boys, each from 2 different sets of twins, had been poisoned with insulin. The insulin levels in their blood were significantly higher than normal, and such a high dose could not have been given by mistake, as the medical facility had put safeguards in place to prevent accidental overdose. However, the objects showed abnormal indicators that led to their deaths, which was confirmed through examination of the evidence. These insulin-poisoned children were taken care of by Lucy. Another significant case in the investigation was the death of a child, which was likely the most brutal. This was the same baby who began bleeding heavily, and the mother saw Lucy nearby. Medical staff reported that a metal instrument had been inserted into the baby's mouth, causing severe internal injuries. During the nearly hour-long resuscitation attempt, the baby bled from both the mouth and nose, losing about 25% of his blood volume. Doctors fought to save the baby, performing CPR and injecting 5 doses of adrenaline to stimulate the heart. Although the heartbeat returned temporarily, the baby did not breathe for more than 15 minutes, giving him no chance of survival. At the time of death, before any investigation began, it was concluded that the cause was natural. Extensive bleeding can sometimes result from intestinal infections in babies. Since there was no suspicion of medical personnel being involved at that time, an autopsy was not performed. This decision is viewed as the biggest mistake made. If it had been established then that the bleeding was due to a foreign object, the investigation would have started sooner, leading to more evidence against Lucy. A similar situation arose with a girl who was one of a set of triplets. After an autopsy, forensic experts discovered she had a serious liver injury. Experienced specialists compared the injury severity to the aftermath of a major accident. However, the exact cause of the girl's ruptured liver was never determined. Lucy, the suspect, went on to kill the second triplet, who was later named in court. There were no other tragic incidents during Lucy's long holiday in Ibiza. However, 2 children died just hours after she returned to work for her first shift. A third child was also in danger, but the parents insisted on taking their child to another medical facility because they felt something was wrong and did not trust the hospital staff. On June 23, 2016, during a separate set of triplet assessments at the trial, a baby was in critical condition with a severely swollen stomach, struggling to breathe. He was placed on a ventilator while numerous staff members, including Lucy, worked frantically around him. The baby's body showed signs of swelling, and his brain was deprived of oxygen for a long time. Doctors worked tirelessly to save him for 17 hours before he passed away. They waited for the transport team to arrive to transfer the baby to the central hospital, while the remaining staff anxiously counted down the minutes until help arrived. Lucy made a shocking comment. "He would not survive anyway." She said it so calmly that everyone was taken aback. She seemed to take pleasure in the unfolding drama and appeared to be waiting for the baby to die. Following these incidents, the doctors, feeling desperate, contacted the police. After the attack on the triplets, Lucy was moved to another department. In that new department, they did not encounter similar issues, despite having the same staff and responsibilities, and the mysterious deaths ceased. However, the doctors recognized the need for stricter security measures. Consequently, Lucy was suspended from work a month. During this time, the hospital continued to investigate, but there was not enough evidence against Lucy. In response to the suspension without any clear reason, Lucy filed a complaint against the hospital. As a result, the management apologized and decided to reinstate her. However, her colleagues disagreed with this decision. They argued that Lucy should only return to work after installing surveillance cameras in every room to monitor her actions. This solution worked, and after the cameras were installed, no further incidents occurred, even after Lucy resumed work. At the same time, the police were conducting an investigation. They discovered evidence showing that Lucy was trying to get the attention of a doctor from the resuscitation team, whose identity remains confidential. Love letters addressed to him were later found in her home. This doctor worked in the neonatal department, but he was married, 17 years older than Lucy, and saw her only as a friend and colleague, with no romantic interest. Before that, they attended advanced training courses in London together, had lunch, went for walks, communicated constantly, and he often drove her home. When the doctor arrived to testify, Lucy lost control. Before this point, she had been distant and unresponsive, but when she saw him, she began to cry and tried to leave until her lawyer calmed her down. This reaction was puzzling and difficult to explain. Lucy asserts that her feelings for the resuscitation doctor are purely friendship, and he supports her statement. However, psychologists and experts investigating the case noted her behavior. Lucy wrote him love letters, expressed joy when he gave her chocolate, and closely monitored his social media accounts as well as those of his wife and teenage children. Experts believe that Lucy deliberately created situations to get closer to him, especially since he was the one performing the resuscitation in all the relevant cases. However, during court proceedings, Lucy dismissed these claims as baseless speculation. In July 2018, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time. Police conducted 2 simultaneous raids, one at her parents' home and another at her own residence. During these searches, a significant amount of evidence was collected, which aided the investigation and supported the case against her. This evidence included medical documents, notes, stickers, and photographs of children's cards found on a mobile phone. More details will be shared later. She was released on bail but was arrested again a year later. In June 2019, Lucy Letby was charged with the murder of 7 children and the attempted murder of 10 others. The trial will begin in October 2022. Is expected to last at least 6 months due to the sheer volume of material to be reviewed, including more than 100 hours of questioning in some 5,500 depositions. However, there are significant restrictions on sharing information because the case is both complex and sensitive. In particular, the identities of the deceased are being kept secret because of their age. Key pieces of evidence include postcards that Lucy created for the victims' parents, expressing her condolences and posing with them. These documents were found on Lucy's phone. A key moment in the court proceedings was when stickers discovered in the Lucy's home were presented. One sticker describes her as the embodiment of evil, while another reveals her confession to killing babies. The note stated that Lucy felt she did not deserve to live and that she had deliberately killed them because she believed she was not good enough to take care of them. She described herself as a bad and evil person. It was also written on the back of the note that she needed help and could not go on anymore. Lucy kept a diary in which she wrote about the problems she faced in life. Lucy thought that she would never have children or a loving husband and family. Lucy felt helpless in everything and was often afraid. She expressed her pain in these short notes filled with despair. She cried every day at the same time. Even though she wrote that nothing was wrong, she still felt anxious about her situation. Initially, Lucy was happy to befriend the resuscitation doctor she loved. She detailed their encounter and how he supported her. However, he turned his back on her in early 2018, just before her first arrest. This was when Lucy was suspended from work, which caused her to fall into depression, as her job was her purpose in life. The lawyer argued that these notes did not prove her guilt, especially given the myriad of issues she faced. She was suspended, hospital staff were accusing her of abuse, and her mental state was unstable. She blamed herself for what happened because she felt she did not have enough time to help her young patients. The defense argued that Lucy's notes did not admit to the murders and suggested that she was only indirectly involved. The prosecution presented a note containing the names of the triplets who were victims of Lucy's attack as evidence. The note included names, birth dates, expressions of regret, and phrases that implied she was involved in the tragedy. It was found under the bed along with the children's medical records. When police searched her apartment, Lucy claimed that these notes could have accidentally ended up at her home when she forgot to throw away all the contents of the pockets of her work coat. Lucy appeared in court visibly emotional as she took the witness stand. She expressed her devastation over being suspended from her job, which had been incredibly important to her. Lucy described her time in prison as particularly challenging, compounded by her depression. The situation escalated when police arrived at her home to conduct a search at 6 a.m. while she was with her father. Being accused of multiple child murders was a complete shock to her. She was released on bail 3 days after her arrest, but in 2019, she faced a second arrest. Lucy stated that these experiences left a lasting impact on her life, making her fearful of loud noises and heightening her sensitivity to stimuli. A prison psychologist later diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder. The trial made everything worse for the Lucy. She had to travel an hour and a half to the courtroom and was only returned to her cell around 7 p.m., which was exhausting for her. She often refused to attend court hearings in front of the families of the murdered children, which the victims' parents found disrespectful. In court, the Lucy expressed that she was going through a tough time filled with discrimination and accusations. She also lost her cherished job, which affected her deeply. The pressure was overwhelming, especially with the possibility of losing her freedom and never getting married. At times, she felt completely helpless during this difficult period. She began to experience mental health challenges due to increasing pressures and difficulties. According to Lucy, she started her career at a medical institution in 2010 as a full-time qualified nurse, caring for 3 to 4 babies in her unit. To enhance her skills, she participated in special training courses and continually pursued additional education to improve her knowledge. Ultimately, Lucy earned the qualification of a mentor, which is a notable achievement for a nurse in her field. Lucy loved her job and enjoyed learning new skills to improve her abilities. In the spring of 2015, she completed a 6-month course in Liverpool, which enabled her to work with babies and children coming from intensive care. She took great pride in her work and would not trade her position for anything. From June 2015 to June 2016, Lucy continued to work in the same department. During this time, several critically ill patients were admitted to the hospital simultaneously. The complex needs of the children included serious conditions, such as blood clotting disorders. Lucy worked incredibly hard, accumulating many overtime hours. She dedicated all her free time to her job, which took a toll on her, leaving her completely exhausted by her daily responsibilities. In 2015, one of the children sadly passed away. This was a challenging moment for Lucy, but she felt supported by her colleagues, who encouraged one another as best they could. Although this incident was likely not her fault, Lucy appreciated how it brought the entire team together, and she wished to experience that sense of unity again. The situation was complicated by many controversial aspects. The prosecution thoroughly investigated and gathered information about children's deaths in the hospital over a 6-year period, starting from when the staff filed a complaint. Throughout this time, Lucy was seen as a skilled and competent nurse with a strong work ethic. She was highly regarded as a specialist, making it hard to believe she could be involved in the deaths. The investigation gathered strong evidence that pointed to her guilt in the horrific murders committed by the nurse. It is noteworthy that she acted completely openly. The jury took 22 days to deliberate before finding her guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 10 others. However, thanks to media coverage, she became known as the most brutal child killer in British history. On August 21, 2023, Lucy Letby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the harshest penalty available under UK law. She is the 4th woman in the history of the UK to receive such a sentence. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christopher Sutton. On Sunday, August 22, 2004, the Sutton family experienced a devastating tragedy following Susan's 57th birthday celebration. The celebration included Susan, her husband John, their son Christopher, his girlfriend Juliet, and family friend Teddy Montoda. After the party, Susan and John went to bed in separate rooms at their home in the upscale Coral Gables neighborhood near Miami, Florida. One night, a tragic event occurred. Susan usually slept in a separate room because her husband, John, snored loudly. While they were sleeping, a car stopped about 4 blocks away from their house. A man dressed in black was approaching their house with the intention of killing Susan and John. The attacker was armed with a 9mm Glock pistol and broke into Susan's house. He first went to John's bedroom and shot him twice in the head. He then moved to the room where Susan was sleeping, shot her 6 times, and left. The police were notified of the incident. Police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, doctors determined that Susan, 57, had died. John was still alive but had suffered serious injuries and had lost a lot of blood. He was taken to hospital, where paramedics worked frantically to save him, although his chances of survival were slim. Before being taken to hospital, John said that he could not see the shooter in the dark and did not know who it was. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned neighbors and searched for surveillance cameras. Although no cameras were found, but neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man dressed in dark clothing running away from the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer had accessed the home through the sliding glass doors. The house was intact, with no money or jewelry taken, indicating to police that this was not a robbery. The attack was clearly targeted at killing Susan and John. But the motive behind the murder remains unknown. Melissa Sutton was 18 years old when her parents were attacked. As a freshman living on her own, she couldn't attend the celebration at their house. She was devastated to learn about her mother's death. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to see her father in the hospital. She described him as looking very unwell. John had miraculously survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head, leaving doctors astonished that he was still alive, although he remained in serious condition. When John woke up in intensive care, he realized he was blind. Additionally, he was experiencing severe shock. He felt unsafe in the hospital, constantly fearing that the killer might return. This left John feeling endangered. He was eager to leave the hospital and find a safe place to hide. His fears were taken seriously, so a guard was assigned to his room, and police patrolled the area around the clock. Due to the severity of his injuries, John was also unable to hear anything. He didn't hear the shots fired at his wife and was unaware of what happened to Susan. As he slowly started to recover, he asked Melissa how his wife was. She did not answer because the police had advised her not to say anything that might upset John further. He later found out that his wife had been murdered by her attacker. The news was a huge shock to him. Susan's death was a huge loss for the whole family. She had devoted her life to being a loving mother. Susan spent many years as an intensive care nurse, a respected profession in the United States. Her career ended in the late 1970s when she decided to stay at home with her husband, John, after the birth of their first child, Christopher. They made this choice because Susan had been unable to conceive for 7 years, at which point they decided to adopt a daughter, Melissa. The police discovered that John had built a successful business and may have had enemies. They also learned that he had received previous threats of violence. The police investigated everyone who had had animosity toward John and Susan, but they all had solid alibis. While the police searched the crime scene for evidence, they discovered that Susan's purse, jewelry belonging to her or her husband, were still intact. Although these items were visible, the police planned to interview John, but he had difficulty communicating. However, he was able to provide some useful information. Although he could not identify the shooter, he recalled seeing a dark figure at the door. The attacker may have been dressed all in black or may have been African American. John could not be certain in the darkness. Unfortunately, this information was not useful to the police. The police decided to speak with Teddy, a family friend who was at the party before the shooting. They visited his house for an interview. Teddy explained that he was on the phone with Susan at the exact moment the shooting happened. He heard a gunshot, followed by silence. Feeling frightened, he called the police, got into his car, and rushed to the Susan family's home, arriving just after the police. Teddy was very shaken by the attack on Susan. However, the police found his account unusual. They questioned why he was still talking to Susan when everyone else had already left the party, leading them to suspect an affair. Teddy clarified that he was not just a family friend but also a business partner. He claimed that they were discussing an urgent business matter and that he frequently communicated with both John and Susan to handle various issues, so he didn't find his late conversation with Susan abnormal. During the conversation, Teddy told the police that the shooters were professional and trained shooters. The police found this information interesting and took Teddy's gun for testing. Teddy was also called into the station for a lie detector test. The police believed he was hiding something and continued to question him. Teddy eventually confessed that he was in a romantic relationship with Susan. The police have often seen love triangles that can lead people to commit terrible acts. However, Teddy's gun did not match the weapon used in the attack and his phone was tracked to a location far from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Teddy denied any involvement in the attack on John and Susan. Although his lie detector test was deemed inconclusive, it was suggested that his anxiety stemmed from trying to keep his affair with Susan a secret to avoid damaging his relationship with his friend John. John had a strong and trusting relationship with Teddy. Shortly before the incident, John and Teddy received one of the largest payouts in their law firm's history, over $1 million, and they celebrated this occasion extravagantly. Teddy was ruled out as a suspect, and the police decided to investigate other family members instead. An examination revealed that John could not have physically inflicted the shot on himself, so he was not considered a suspect. Their daughter Melissa has a solid alibi because she was in another city and also passed a lie detector test. The police then investigated Christopher Sutton. He had a girlfriend named Juliet. They had attended a family party together. Christopher quickly claimed that he and Juliet had gone to the movies the night before and provided their tickets as evidence. Juliet confirmed his story. The police then requested the cinema's surveillance camera footage, confirming that they had indeed gone to the cinema that night and confirming their alibi. After leaving the hospital, John moved in with Christopher so he could care for him for a while. However, disturbing evidence was discovered that Christopher actually wanted to kill his parents. He even threatened to kill his mother during a fight. Christopher became the prime suspect in the case. Additionally, Christopher had a criminal record that included vandalizing a teacher's home. When Christopher was 16, his parents, John and Susan, decided to send him to a reform school. Christopher was aggressive and had trouble controlling his anger, which made it difficult for him to socialize with other teenagers. He changed schools at least 6 times. He often skipped school. John would drop him off at the main entrance, walk to the door, but then Christopher would sneak out through another exit and go do his own thing. However, his absences were not his biggest problem. He also got involved in some criminal activities. One day, he and a group of friends broke into a teacher's house, causing damage and graffiti. As a result, Christopher was arrested and the teacher filed a lawsuit against him. The damage was estimated to be in excess of $50,000, and his parents had to pay it. Christopher's family had no financial problems and could easily pay the fine. However, his family was frustrated with their son's out-of-control behavior and did not know how to handle him. Christopher was a difficult teenager who had no respect for adult authority. His rebellion began with his love of piercings and tattoos, which his parents strongly disapproved of. Despite their efforts, they were unable to change his behavior, which led to more problems. One day, Christopher pointed an unloaded rifle at his mother and sister, threatening to kill them. Shortly before Christopher's 16th birthday, Susan discovered a note in his room that outlined a plan to kill his parents to inherit their money. Susan informed John about the note, and they confronted Christopher, who dismissed it as a joke. However, when his parents saw the note, they became frightened. From that point on, they were afraid to be alone with their son in the house. They even sought legal help, which led to a court-ordered rehabilitation program. Staff from a specialist organization forcibly transferred Christopher to a rehabilitation facility on the island of Samoa called Paradise Bay. It is a strict school for troubled youth. In 1998, when Christopher first arrived at this institution, his behavior became extremely aggressive, leading to him being restrained. Following this, he was taken to a remote camp in the mountains, where he was left tied up. The staff aimed to re-educate him through these strict measures. Typically, such severe discipline was effective and helped even the most challenging cases to improve. After spending a year in a behavior correction facility, Christopher sent his parents an emotional video message. In it, he described the violence he experienced there and accused his parents of not loving him for sending him to such a place. Upon hearing this, his parents visited institutions for troubled teenagers in Samoa but found nothing wrong. As a result, they did not believe Christopher's claims. They knew about the strict rules in place and believed they were intended to benefit troubled teens. Furthermore, Christopher was there under a court order, so his parents could not take him away. However, Christopher still hoped to leave the facility when he turned 18. John then received a court order stating that Christopher would remain in custody. The program at Paradise Bay was extended for another year, which surprised Christopher. But he had no choice but to remain at the facility. In 2000, Paradise Bay was closed after management faced multiple allegations of youth mistreatment. Christopher finally returned home on his 19th birthday after 30 months at Paradise Bay. This situation raised concerns for the police, as his anger at being mistreated could be considered a motive for murder. After enduring such torture, Christopher may have felt the urge to take revenge on his parents. However, after returning from Paradise Bay, he changed. Christopher always showed that he had become a caring and calm son, especially in how he took care of his father following an incident. John could not believe that his son could be involved in the case, believing that Christopher had changed. However, the police suspected that Christopher had orchestrated the double murder, which was only partially successful because his father survived. Although Christopher had an alibi, he may have hired someone else to carry out the crime. The police needed to gather evidence to support their suspicions. So they brought him in for a second interview. In this conversation, Christopher reveals details that have not been revealed to the public and remain confidential. Christopher said he went to the scene of the incident. He saw the shooter walking down the hallway, and his mother Susan had been shot 6 times, information that was later confirmed during the investigation. Christopher also recounted the order in which the shots were fired and other key details. While Christopher appears distraught and cries over his mother's death, the police believe he is lying and is actually a criminal. However, Christopher was supported by his girlfriend Juliet, who also seemed shocked by the incident. She said she herself had been in shock for a long time, following the news of the shooting. Juliet met Christopher when she was 17, and he was 19, having just returned from a school for troubled youth. She described him as kind, polite and courteous, and he made a strong positive impression on her. He treated her like a true gentleman. So she could never imagine that he could commit murder. Juliet said that his parents welcomed her into their family. His mother, Susan, taught her how to apply makeup and helped her develop her dressing style. His father, John, also supported her by giving her a job at his law firm. The couple's parents supported them financially without expecting anything in return. They were happy to see the couple together. When police first encountered Christopher at the crime scene, it was shortly after he had been informed of the incident. He appeared to be very upset, and one officer noticed tears on his face. However, his initial statement to police during questioning shattered the impression of sadness. He quickly explained that he and Juliet had had dinner with their parents but left at around 9 p.m. to go to the movies. He then gave the police their movie tickets. Instead of asking how his parents were doing, he focused on justifying his actions and emphasized his alibi before any charges were brought. Police carefully reviewed surveillance footage from the cinema, which showed Christopher leaving after the movie around midnight. They noticed he immediately used his mobile phone to make a call, arousing curiosity about who he was contacting. The police quickly checked all his calls. Police later determined that Christopher had contacted a man named Garrett Kopp 31 times in the days leading up to the murder, which raised suspicions. Garrett, a police officer with a criminal record, had come to the attention of police. They suspected he might be involved in the crime. The case drew attention to Garrett's troubled past, including multiple arrests, adding to police suspicions. Police began to consider Garrett as a potential suspect. At the time of the case, he was out on bail. When police examined the weapon used in the murder, they found it to be very similar to Garrett's Glock, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Garrett had a tense conversation with the police and later admitted to attacking John and Susan. However, Garrett insisted that he did not act on his own. He said that Christopher had threatened to kill him and his son if he did not comply. Garrett insisted that the idea for the attack was entirely Christopher's. He also said that Christopher had given him the gun and had left the door unlocked, allowing him easy access to the house. The police arrested Garrett and charged him with murder, but his testimony was not enough to keep Christopher in custody. Juliet was questioned by police who believed she had more information than she was revealing. Despite their efforts, she denied any involvement and insisted on her innocence for several hours. The interrogation lasted 13 hours in total, but the police did not record it. Later, Juliet alleged that police had threatened her with arrest to force a confession and acted provocatively during the questioning. However, she eventually admitted that Christopher felt a strong resentment towards his parents for placing him in a facility for troubled teenagers. Recently, his parents tried to push him to get a job and start covering his own costs, which he found unacceptable, and this led to family conflicts. During questioning, Juliet revealed that Christopher had been planning revenge on his parents for years. He often spoke about the inheritance and how they could live without worries if he could take everything his parents had earned. However, she didn't take his threats seriously. The police had gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant for Christopher Sutton. However, by that time, he had disappeared. This was a crucial moment for the police, as they feared that Christopher might return to harm John. Fortunately, the police were able to locate and arrest Christopher, charging him with the murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father. Garrett Kopp and Christopher Sutton were eventually tried separately, and both faced the death penalty. Christopher, however, maintained that he had no role in planning the crime. The defense argued that the police were unfair, claiming that the police pressured Juliet, which influenced her testimony. After Garrett learned that he could face the death penalty, Garrett decided to cooperate with the prosecution by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, which was in his favor. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution's case took a turn when Juliet appeared in court to testify. She revealed that Christopher had often expressed anger at his parents for not giving him money, even saying that they deserved to die for their actions. The defense argued that much of Juliet's testimony was given under police pressure and should be excluded from the case. However, the judge denied this request. In court, Juliet maintained that she had been truthful during her interrogation with the police. She stated that she viewed Christopher's anger as mere frustration and never believed he would go on to commit such serious crimes. After Juliet's testimony, John, the surviving father, shared his thoughts. After hearing all the witness testimony, John believed that Christopher was capable of committing the crime. John noted that even after leaving the hospital, Christopher continued to try to manage the family's finances, which led him to believe that Christopher was involved in the crime. When it was Christopher's turn to speak, he accused Garrett of attacking their parents due to his drug addiction. Christopher highlighted several moments when Garrett was out of control due to drugs, claiming that during those times he was dangerous and capable of committing any crime. Christopher also mentioned that he kept drugs in Susan's bedroom closet. The Garrett might have entered the house to steal illegal drugs. However, the prosecutor argued that the scene did not appear to be a burglary, everything was intact, even the money and jewelry were intact. If it was a burglary, Garrett would have taken valuables. In his defense, Christopher claimed that he had changed and overcome the anger, resentment, and disappointment he felt towards his parents for sending him to a special school. He believed that he had changed for the better. After extensive deliberation, the jury found Christopher Sutton guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Christopher was shocked by the verdict because he was sure that he would be acquitted. Christopher received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, survivor John Sutton is putting in great effort to regain his eyesight. He has formed a new relationship and started a family, and at 70 years old, he continues to practice law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pamela Buchbinder. Jacob Nolan was born in 1991 into a wealthy family in Miami, Florida. As the third child in the family, he received a lot of love from his parents. They realized that he was different from his peers. However, at the age of 5, Jacob was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When Jacob turned 15, his family noticed that he was experiencing significant mood swings. Despite this, he was doing well in school. He created an educational smartphone app and won a competition in Miami. However, a month later, Jacob couldn't get out of bed, had no motivation to do anything, even stand up. They finally brought him to a doctor who diagnosed him with depression and anxiety. At 17, Jacob expressed that he no longer wanted to live. His parents noticed his unstable behavior and mental state, prompting them to take him to a hospital where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This serious mental illness involves extreme mood swings, ranging from depression to emotional outbursts. Those affected feel trapped in their own thoughts. After finishing high school, Jacob enrolled in college while continuing his treatment. Throughout this time, he saw various psychiatrists who prescribed increasingly stronger medications. From the ages of 17 to 20, Jacob underwent numerous treatment courses, took 5 to 6 pills daily, and tried around 30 different medications, yet none seemed to help. By 2012, at 21 years old, Jacob was still deteriorating. His parents were deeply concerned and unsure of what steps to take next. Then, one day, a relative from New York, Pamela Buchbinder, called with an offer of help. Jacob's parents were relieved, thinking they had gotten help. However, they had no idea of the challenges that were about to come to their family. Pamela, a 43-year-old psychotherapist, lives in Chelsea, Manhattan, with her 4-year-old son, Calder. She and Jacob Nolan are cousins with a 22-year age gap. Jacob was the godfather of her son. In 2012, Pamela offered to help Jacob by inviting him to move from Florida to her apartment. While living with her, she provided him with therapy sessions and prescribed medication. In exchange for her help, Jacob took responsibility for Calder's care. Jacob trusted her completely. In one photo, Jacob is seen lying in bed with Pamela, laughing, which shows he feels comfortable and at home with her. However, it's important to note that this relationship is not just familial. Pamela is also Jacob's psychotherapist. Jacob cared deeply for Calder and treated him like a son. He wanted to set a positive example for his godson of what a real man should be like. This approach seemed to work, as Jacob, who had struggled with mental illness for years, seemed to be stabilizing, joking frequently and always smiling. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, Pamela began to frequently express her frustrations with her ex-partner, Michael Weiss, Calder's father. Pamela ended her relationship with Michael shortly after the birth of her son. Michael Weiss, 38, is a psychotherapist. On the surface, he and Pamela appear to be a happy, loving couple. However, beneath the perfect exterior, their relationship is in trouble. Both Michael and Pamela have reported domestic violence to the police. Pamela once attacked Michael with a piece of broken glass. Michael received medical treatment, stitched up the wound, and later that day, he reported the incident to the police. As a result, Pamela was arrested and charged with assault. However, she was soon forgiven by Michael and the couple reconciled, but a few months later, Pamela went to the police again, claiming that Michael had threatened her and wanted to kill her. She later retracted that statement. Although they were never officially married, Michael and Pamela's relationship lasted about 4 years. After they had a son in 2008, Pamela finally ended the relationship. Their tumultuous relationship ended. But a new conflict arose. The custody battle for their son, Calder. Every day, Pamela tells Jacob about Michael in insulting words. She complained that Michael refused to pay child support and even accused him of doing bad things to their son, Calder, during his visits. On the morning of November 12, 2012, Jacob was awakened by Pamela's gentle touch. She climbed into his bed, caressed his back, and whispered sweet nothings in his ear. She told him that Jacob was her savior. He was the best person in the world because no one understood her like he did. However, her affectionate mood quickly changed. She took a black sports bag from her closet and stuffed it with a long-handled hammer and a kitchen knife. Overwhelmed with emotion, she began to cry and told Jacob that today was the day he needed to face Michael. A diagram showing the entrance to the multi-story office building where Michael is seeing patients is written on a piece of paper. Jacob stands up, grabs his bag, stuffs the diagram into his pocket, and leaves. Before leaving, he washes his face and declares, "Today is the day our lives will change for the better because Michael will be eliminated." Jacob arrived at the right high-rise in Manhattan. He circled the building, observing it from different angles. Entering through the service entrance, he checked in on the first floor, provided his real name, and mentioned he was going to the tutoring center. He was allowed inside. Jacob took the elevator to the 12th floor and made his way to Michael's office. He heard a patient inside and decided to wait in the hallway for the appointment to finish. Soon, the patient would exit, leaving Michael alone. While waiting, Jacob felt increasingly anxious. Doubts flooded his mind, making him question whether he was making the right decisions. At one point, he thought about abandoning everything and running home. However, the idea of returning to Pamela without completing her request and disappointing her was stronger than his fear. Jacob realized he had no choice but to continue. After the patient left, Jacob entered the office and informed Michael that Pamela had asked him to collect financial documents for the Calders kindergarten. As Michael searched for the documents, Jacob asked to use the restroom. In the restroom, Jacob took out a knife and hid it in his pocket, then retrieved a large hammer. He exited the bathroom and approached Michael, swinging the hammer at him. Thankfully, Michael reacted quickly, ducking just in time to avoid a serious injury, though the hammer struck his shoulder. Jacob then pulled out the knife, and a struggle ensued. Michael, being physically larger, quickly fought back. The people around heard Michael's cry for help. They mistakenly thought that the doctor was being attacked by an unstable mental patient. They quickly called 911 to report the incident. Before the police arrived, Jacob and Michael, feeling exhausted, sat down in the hallway. Jacob took out his phone and took a selfie, which he sent to Pamela along with a question about what he should do next. But he never received a reply. The situation made him feel very strange. The police and ambulance arrived shortly after. The injured men were rushed to the hospital for treatment. Fortunately, none of them had life-threatening injuries. Michael was treated and sent home the same day. Jacob's injuries were more serious and the doctors noted that he was unstable. Jacob was arrested in the hospital while he was receiving treatment. He sent a detailed message to Pamela about what had happened to him and Michael. Although she initially ignored his message, she eventually asked which hospital he was in. When Pamela arrived, she was not allowed to see Jacob, who was already handcuffed to the bed. Jacob spent 4 days in the hospital before being taken to a jail cell after his discharge. He was released on bail of $200,000 while awaiting trial. Jacob was permitted to fly from New York to his parents' home in Florida. Several weeks after the incident, Michael filed a lawsuit against Pamela, accusing her of conspiring to kill him. Michael argued that Pamela was dangerous and insisted that their son should live with him. He presented surveillance footage from a hardware store showing that the day before the attack, Pamela and Jacob had purchased a hammer together, and Pamela had paid in cash. Pamela denied any involvement, saying that she had only asked Jacob to retrieve some financial documents from Michael, but had not asked Jacob to attack. Although she admitted to giving Jacob a knife, she explained that it was to protect her son Calder, since Calder's daycare was on the first floor of the building where Michael worked. Shortly thereafter, the judge transferred custody of Calder to Michael Weiss, granting him full custody and banning Pamela from contacting her son for 5 years. A few months after the incident, Jacob accused Pamela of orchestrating the attack on Michael. He claimed that Pamela meticulously planned the attack and that she had instructed Jacob to approach Michael and hit him with a hammer. Jacob previously said that Pamela had been psychologically manipulating him. Pamela repeatedly told him that Michael was harming her son, but there was no evidence to support her claim. No one ever witnessed Michael harming Calder or saying anything negative to his son. In fact, relatives testified that Michael cared deeply for his son. Pamela was someone Jacob trusted completely and considered very close. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents were in despair. They fully supported their son and claimed that Pamela had brainwashed him using psychological techniques from her practice. In March 2016, Jacob Nolan's trial began. He claimed that Pamela had forced him to attack Michael Weiss. Prosecutors described Jacob as a spoiled child from a wealthy family, noting that he provided 3 inconsistent accounts of the event and appeared confused. When the police first arrived at Michael's office, Jacob pointed at Michael and accused him of attacking Jacob with a knife. However, during questioning, Jacob claimed that he had never used a hammer in Michael's office. He explained that he had brought the hammer for self-defense because he was afraid of Michael. In his third statement, Jacob said that Michael had attacked him first. Prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence regarding the motive behind the attack on Michael. Just before the attack, Michael had purchased a $1.5 million life insurance policy, naming his son Calder as the beneficiary. However, 3 days before the attack, on November 9, 2012, Michael had agreed to add Pamela as a co-beneficiary and allow her to manage Calder's money. Jacob claimed that this was the first time he had learned about the insurance policy and claimed that Pamela had never shared her financial affairs with him. During the trial, it was revealed that Jacob had purchased plastic zip ties from a hardware store in addition to the hammer found with Pamela. Jacob confirmed this and made a shocking admission. Pamela had asked him not only to kill Michael but also to ensure he suffered before dying. She described brutal acts that Jacob was supposed to carry out. Jacob refused to inflict such extreme cruelty. But he agreed to kill Michael. Jacob mentioned that Pamela initially wanted to create a homemade weapon using an air pistol, but when they got to the hardware store, they decided it would be easier and more effective to use a hammer instead. Jacob's attorney focused on proving that Jacob was insane. However, proving that he was insane is quite difficult. Currently, there is no test that can reveal a person's thoughts and feelings at the time of the crime. Evaluations are usually based on interviews, police reports, medical records, and sometimes social media messages. Often, 2 different psychiatrists can give conflicting opinions, which can confuse judges and juries. Although mental illness can affect emotions, thoughts, and behavior, throughout the trial, Jacob clearly understood his actions and admitted that they were wrong and bad. He did not appear insane in court. He was handsome, articulate, well-dressed, and answered questions clearly. Pamela was not called to testify at the trial by either the prosecution or the defense. Jacob Nolan, who had a mental disorder, faced skepticism regarding his claim that Pamela was the one who initiated the attack. Before the trial, Jacob's lawyers hired detectives to locate Pamela, but they were unable to find her, and her apartment was empty. In March 2016, after a 2-week trial, 24-year-old Jacob Nolan was convicted of attempted murder and second-degree assault, receiving a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Jacob was very upset about his sentence, stating, "It's unfair. I'm not a danger to society." His parents regretted their decision to send him to live with their Pamela, believing it was their biggest mistake. On October 19, 2017, nearly 5 years after Michael's attack, police located Pamela in Sullivan, New York. The Manhattan District Attorney charged her with conspiracy to murder Michael Weiss. At the time of Pamela's arrest, police found her passport and Calder's birth certificate. Pamela was arrested and maintained her innocence. She hired two of New York's top attorneys, who claimed that the video showing her doing laundry and the video of her buying the hammer had been edited. They claimed that Pamela was a highly educated psychotherapist and would never have considered organizing a murder. In the 5 years after Jacob's attack, Pamela lived a normal life. She worked and rented an apartment. She did not attempt to go into hiding or flee the country, but she avoided reporters and did not comment on Jacob's crimes. Pamela was detained before her trial at the notorious Rikers Island prison in New York, where she spent 5 years due to legal issues. On September 7, 2022, during a pre-trial hearing, Pamela made a statement agreeing to plead guilty in return for a lighter sentence. However, a month later, she decided to withdraw her plea. Pamela's trial took place. The jury found Pamela Buchbinder guilty and she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. After the verdict was read, she looked sadly at her relative, who blew her kisses. Jacob and Pamela are currently serving their sentences in separate correctional facilities in New York. Jacob is scheduled to be released in 2024, while Pamela will be released in 2027. Jacob maintains regular phone contact with his parents. He has expressed remorse for his actions and reflects on them every night. He even wishes to meet Michael Weiss in person to apologize and seek forgiveness. When Pamela is released, her son, Calder, will be 19. He is currently being raised by his biological father, Michael, who still works in Manhattan. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the Northern Cape province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Sharetha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snakebite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own, while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Sharetha experienced the luxuries and wealth, She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Suretha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Suretha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Suretha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, she began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Suretha was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Suretha agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Suretha at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Suretha discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Suretha firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Suretha's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Suretha join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Sarita and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Sarita enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Sarita began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Sarita's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Sarita hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Sarita had grown apart and were living separate lives. Sarita began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores, and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poeter, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Sarita called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Sarita tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poeter. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Sarita called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Suretha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques Van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Suretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, but she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Suretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Suretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Suretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Amantel Bareki to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Amantel. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Amantel were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Amantel and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Leon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Leon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Amantel refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Amantel and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Leon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Leon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Leon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Leon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Leon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Leon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Leon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Suretha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Suretha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants to removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques Van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Enrich Williams and Amantel Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Suretha Britz, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Leon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Leon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Leon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Suretha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins. On the morning of August 27, 2015, 36-year-old Amanda Colley returned home to find her house in chaos. Someone had broken into her while she was away. Her house was in disarray, with boxes knocked over, trash cans emptied, and many items broken or damaged, with glass strewn everywhere. Amanda panicked and checked her phone, which had many missed calls and messages from her ex-husband that she didn't want to reply to. At 5:30 a.m., she called her boyfriend and the police for help. She had recently started dating a man named Lamar. At that time, Lamar was driving his pickup truck down a route that led to her house. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene. One officer arrived to assess the danger of the situation. He was to talk to Amanda and assess the damage to her property. The police assessed the situation and left after Amanda chose not to file a formal complaint. Before the police left her home around 9 a.m. that morning, someone came to Amanda's aid. The first person to visit was Lindy Dobbins, Amanda's best friend. At 39 and a mother of 3, Lindy had taken the morning off work to be with Amanda and support her. Lindy was a kind person who always helped others in difficult situations. After a while, their mutual friend Rachel Hendricks joined them. She had dropped her kids off at school and decided to support Amanda since she had some free time. By this time, Lamar was already at Amanda's house. The four of them gathered at Amanda's house, watching the chaos and discussing what had happened while considering their next steps. Amanda was still in shock from the incident and realized that she needed to consult a lawyer before reporting her ex-husband, who she believed was responsible. Eventually, Amanda's ex-husband called her again. This time, she chose to answer, leading to a 14-minute conversation. While they were in the living room, they suddenly heard the sound of shattering glass. A few minutes later, a police officer stopped Lamar on the street. He was running frantically, not paying attention to where he was going, trying to escape Amanda's house. According to him, he left the living room as soon as the shooting started, went down to the laundry room, and then fled through the garage, which was partially open. Lamar reported that unexpectedly, gunfire erupted at Amanda's house. He informed the police officer that he thought the shots were fired from outside the house. He did not observe anyone inside being hit by bullets. He was unable to give the police specific details. Lamar is certain that the attacker is targeting him, leading him to believe that the women inside the house are alive. The situation was dire. Minutes after Lamar left the house, the other women tried to escape. Rachel ran through the living room and through the broken glass front door. She spotted the neighbor's house next door and quickly ran over to hide. After escaping, Rachel called 911 to report that she had escaped but had injured her arm. She suspected that an armed attack had occurred at her friend's house and knew exactly who was likely responsible. Realizing the danger, Rachel instinctively ran away when Lamar told them to hide. She was shocked when the gunfire continued. While speaking to the police, Rachel expressed her concern for her friends and urged the police to come quickly to save them. In the next few minutes, 2 more calls came into the police station, one from Amanda and one from her friend Lindy. However, during the calls, they only screamed while the gunshots echoed in the background. The police immediately went to Amanda Colley's house to rescue her. Gunshot wounds to Lindy's arms and legs showed that she was trying to defend herself from her attacker. Unfortunately, her efforts were futile. The attacker had fired a full magazine at her, indicating a clear intention to kill. Lindy was discovered at the end of a long corridor, lying in a pool of blood. It seems she tried to escape, but was killed before she could get away. Rachel stated that just a few seconds before the shooting started, she looked toward the backyard of the house. There, along the garden path, she saw the outline of a man who then pulled out a weapon through the glass door. A group of people stood behind him. The glass was quite thin, preventing her from seeing exactly who was there. The police corroborated her account by analyzing the locations of the bullet holes in the backyard. On the path, they found several unused cartridges, which were identified as Delhi caliber bullets. Lamar went back to Amanda's house. When the police arrived, he felt assured that they would have the situation under control. Lamar mentioned that he heard gunshots coming from the backyard and believed that he was the perpetrator's target. At that moment, he urged everyone to run. Although he did not see the perpetrator, he suspected that the perpetrator was Amanda's ex-husband, who had spoken to her on the phone just minutes before the attack. Rachel explained that they didn't have enough time to react as quickly as Lamar, so she and Lindy decided to hide in the pantry. she heard Amanda on the other side, probably trying to find a place to hide and possibly running to the bathroom. Seconds later, Rachel heard the front door being broken down. At that moment, the intruder entered the house. He approached the pantry, tried to open the door, and found that it was locked from the inside. The attacker wanted to know where Amanda's boyfriend was. Rachel and Lindy replied that he wasn't there while continuing to hold the door. The intruder then fired through the door, hitting Rachel's arm, causing her to lose her balance. Linda's leg was now injured, causing her to scream in pain. Amanda was also injured but still alive and screaming near the bathroom. In that brief moment, Rachel jumped up and ran from the house. According to Rachel, the attacker could have been Amanda's ex-husband, James Terry Colley. She recognized his familiar voice behind the door. A few minutes later, James's father called the police to report that his son had just confessed to him that he had caught his wife with a friend. At that point, the police arrived at the house. After the attack, James fled the scene. K-9 units were deployed to locate James. They followed James's scent to a nearby street. During the search, a cell phone was found, which was likely left behind by James. Unfortunately, the police were unable to identify the vehicle in which he drove away. He had disappeared from the scene of the crime. The area was searched with specially trained dogs and helicopters, but these efforts yielded no results. Despite an extensive search that lasted several hours, James remained at large, posing a threat to public safety. Fortunately, police arrested James later that evening while he was driving his sister's car. During a search of the car, police discovered a shotgun and 2 Delroy and PGO caliber handguns in the passenger seat, along with a large amount of ammunition. A subsequent examination of the gun confirmed that the bullets matched those found at the crime scene and in Amanda and Lindy's bodies. In addition, glass fragments identical to those found in Amanda's home were discovered. After his arrest, James refused to cooperate with the investigation, claiming that he could not recall anything from the time of the tragic events. Further investigation revealed that James and Amanda had been married for over 8 years and had 2 children. Their relationship then began to deteriorate, leading to their divorce. James moved to his sister's house, 20 km away from their family home, where Amanda and the children continued to live. As the divorce proceedings progressed over the following months, they encountered many difficulties regarding child custody and property division. The two then decided to start new chapters in their lives. James began dating a co-worker named Emmy, while Amanda pursued a relationship with Lamar, another co-worker from the sporting goods company. Even though the couple's relationship had completely broken down, James was still possessive of his ex-wife Amanda. He suspected that she was seeing someone new and called her several times to find out who it was. Amanda did not share the truth because she feared it would lead to serious problems. As a result, James became increasingly angry and aggressive. He called her frequently, becoming so intrusive that Amanda felt compelled to go to court to get a restraining order to protect herself. The weekend before the attack, Amanda's neighbor and close friend took a photo of a man mowing the lawn in front of Amanda's house. The man was identified as her new boyfriend, Lamar. When James found out, he tried to contact Amanda, insulting her and demanding to know who she was seeing. Amanda lied, claiming that the man in the photo was just a landscaper. James was going crazy because Amanda had found someone new. Early on the morning of August 27, he planned a terrible act. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes did not capture the moment James, her ex-husband, entered Amanda's house. This was not surprising, since he had lived there for a long time and was familiar with the areas not covered by the cameras. He approached the house undetected from the backyard, just as he had intended. James entered the house around 3 a.m., but found it empty. Frustrated, he started to create chaos, throwing items around and dumping trash from the kitchen bins. He broke the TV and damaged several costly appliances. This destruction seemed aimed at upsetting Amanda. As he caused this damage, he was also getting ready for the terrible actions that were to come. James was looking for evidence that Amanda was having an affair with another man. Eventually, he discovered something that confirmed his suspicions and made him even angrier. At 4:00 a.m., he went to Mike's house, who lived across the street. James knocked loudly, shouted and swore, while discussing Amanda in an angry tone. Mike showed James everything he had found in Amanda's house, including some intimate toys that James had never seen before with his ex-wife. Mike knew that James had been given a restraining order prohibiting him from having access to his home or his ex-wife. However, James had violated the order. This could have resulted in a court hearing and possible arrest. Mike tried to calm James down by offering him a drink and suggesting that he go home and rest to avoid making any more impulsive decisions. Unfortunately, James ignored this advice and decided to go to court to resolve the issues related to his first restraining order violation. On the way, he called his father to tell him about the damage he had done to Amanda's home. His father reprimanded him and urged him not to be stupid again. James was arrested and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, robbery, and aggravated stalking for violating a court order. James maintained his innocence, claiming amnesia, and was taken to the county jail to await a hearing. The prosecution needed to prove that James attacked Amanda, her friends, and Lamar. Although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crimes, there were multiple witnesses present who confirmed that he was the perpetrator. Police pieced together James's movements on the day of the attack. James arrived at Mike's house around 4:00 a.m. and stayed with Mike until 4:45 a.m. After leaving, James went to his sister's house, where he lived with his sister and father, about 15 minutes from James's old home. After returning to his sister's house, he retrieved a gun and ammunition before committing the crime. Prosecutors allege that the motive for the attack was a photo he had taken of Lamar at Amanda's house. Police searched James's cell phone and computer. They learned that at approximately 5:00 a.m., he began texting Amanda. He had tried to call her just 1 minute before the first gunshots and had called Amanda 22 times before that. Up until that point, Amanda had tried to avoid answering his calls, but after seeing the state of her house, she decided to pick up the phone. During the call, she accused James of robbing and vandalizing her house. Amanda had asked James to leave her alone. It was clear that she had done everything she could to avoid contact with James. She even suggested that she would keep quiet about his vandalizing her house if he would finally leave her life. The defense team is determined to fight the charges. They argue that James was prescribed medication to treat anxiety and depression, which was supposed to help him but when taken together caused unpredictable side effects. This reaction was made worse the night before the attack, especially after he had consumed beer and strong drinks. On the evening of August 26, after returning home, he took another medication that was supposed to help him sleep. He fell asleep but woke up a few hours later. The defense argued that the combination of the drugs he had taken and the alcohol had contributed to his uncontrollable behavior. However, James had plenty of time before the incident. The effects of these substances should have diminished, and he even attended the trial that morning without arousing any suspicion. After leaving the courthouse, he began calling and texting Amanda. Before arriving at his wife's house, he filled up his car with gas. The prosecutor's office believes this is a sign that he was preparing to flee the state, suggesting that he had planned ahead. During a search of the car, police found a shotgun, 2 handguns, and a large amount of ammunition of various calibers. These items were scattered throughout the vehicle, indicating that they had been hastily discarded. Police also found the same drugs that the defense had mentioned. The attorneys prepared expert witnesses in pharmacology and psychiatry to demonstrate that the combination of drugs James was taking could impair his ability to think rationally and make decisions. According to the attorneys, this impairment ruled out premeditated culpability, suggesting that James's actions could have been a spontaneous outburst of aggression beyond his control. The pharmacologist stated that the combination of these drugs was likely to cause amnesia. Therefore, James may not actually remember the incident. During police questioning, Mike provided detailed evidence of James coming to his house that morning. James was a bit strange. Mike knew that James was trying to cope with Amanda's new relationship after their divorce. Mike could not understand why James still wanted to possess her even though they were divorced. James became obsessed and sent pictures of Amanda's new boyfriend to her, which led to a tragic outcome. Police carefully examined text messages exchanged between James and Mike. It appeared that Mike was telling the truth. James harbored resentment not only toward his ex-wife, but also toward her friends. He specifically blamed Amanda's best friend, Lindy, for turning Amanda against him, which fueled his hatred for her. Evidence showed that James had collected a weapon just before leaving the house, the prosecutor's office said. Police also noted that James' father had tried to intervene and stop him from doing so, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The key witness for the defense was James's sister, Rhonda, who lived with him at the time. However, she was on vacation in Italy during the attack and returned 2 weeks later. Rhonda disputed the prosecutor's assertion that James was planning the attack. She believed that the 2 guns found in the car were there by chance, as she had been carrying them for a while. The defense argued that this indicated the attack was impulsive and unintentional. In contrast, the prosecution thought Rhonda was merely trying to defend younger brother, with whom she had always had a close relationship. The prosecution pointed out inconsistencies in Rhonda's testimony, especially regarding the type of handgun she reported having in the car. This raised the jury's suspicions. James faced the possibility of the death penalty for the assault. James's defense team aimed to reduce the severity of the sentence. The only sure way to spare James's life was to contest the premeditated murder charges, which could have carried a sentence of life in prison without parole. However, the prosecution was determined not to negotiate and refused to offer a plea deal. They argued that James, who had taken 2 lives and seriously injured 2 others, deserved the death penalty. The defense argued that James had no intention of harming Amanda or her friends. However, when he arrived at Amanda's home, an incident occurred that angered him. It is believed that there was an argument between the men, which may have caused James to start shooting. However, surviving witnesses, Rachel and Lamar, claimed that no conversation occurred and that no one provoked him. On the other hand, the prosecution argued strongly that James did not arrive at the home by accident. Instead, he returned to his sister's home to get weapons and ammunition for the murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. The key piece of evidence in the case was a phone call between James and Amanda that took place shortly before the shooting began. This call was played to the jury in court and lasted 14 minutes. During the conversation, Amanda attempted to end her relationship with James. She cried and begged him, trying to intimidate him by mentioning the restraining order and threatening to call the police if he continued to stalk her. It was clear that she had been enduring his harassment for a long time, but he paid no attention to her suffering. After both sides presented their arguments, the jury began deliberating their verdict. 2 hours later, they reached a unanimous decision, finding James Terry Colley, 38, guilty on all 7 counts, including burglary. However, the case was not over. 2 weeks later, the same jury reconvened to decide whether James should receive the death penalty. The defense team remained hopeful. They wanted to prove that the combination of drugs he had been taking could have caused side effects, such as memory loss. Experts, including a forensic psychiatrist and a pharmacist, supported this claim, arguing that James suffered from parasomnias, which meant he could not have been aware and could not remember the events that had occurred. Psychiatrists claim that people with parasomnias can walk, drive, and perform deliberate actions. However, the prosecutor's office has disputed these claims by presenting court records showing that James had been in court the morning before the attack. He had interacted with several people and there was no unusual behavior. James appeared calm, with no signs of slowing down, confusion, or depression, common signs of people with parasomnias. The prosecution successfully convinced the jury of James's guilt for causing the deaths of Amanda and Lindy. The jury unanimously decided that he should receive the death penalty. A third hearing then took place, where the court gave the defense one last chance to present any compelling evidence that might lead to a reduction in the death sentence. During this hearing, James took the stand for himself for the first time, describing the incident as a terrible accident. However, his argument lacked credibility. The defense attorneys also failed to present any substantial evidence, leading to James Terry Colley's death sentence being upheld. He is currently in prison, awaiting execution by lethal injection. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Long. Christina Long was born on March 17, 1989, in Fairfield, Connecticut, USA. In 2001, due to serious family problems, she moved in with her Aunt Shelley. Her mother, Beth Franzak, had been addicted to drugs for many years, which caused her life to deteriorate. She witnessed her mother's decline firsthand, which deeply affected her. The home Christina lived in became chaotic and unsafe, as her mother frequently hosted men involved in the sale of illegal substances. Consumed by her addiction, her mother paid little attention to her well-being. She was neglected, which was starting to have a serious impact on her daily life and her performance at school. Teachers reported the matter to social services. When social workers came to check on her, they found her mother in critical condition. Fortunately, Christina was not seriously damaged and was still trying to keep up with her studies, daily activities, although it was not easy for her. Unlike her mother, she did not use drugs. Social services decided to move her in with her Aunt Shelley, who was qualified to take on this responsibility. The service staff assessed Christina's father's condition. However, his condition was not much better than that of her biological mother, Beth. Although Christina's parents' marriage initially seemed to be excellent, just 2 years after her birth, her parents divorced. Her biological father chose not to remarry, and instead embarked on a decadent lifestyle. He changed girlfriends frequently and paid little attention to his daughter or Beth, who was dealing with a serious addiction. It was clear that he was not the right person to care for Christina, a 12-year-old girl. Ultimately, it was concluded that his living environment was too dangerous and unsuitable for her. As a result, Christina was removed from this harmful situation and placed in a safer, more supportive environment. Custody was given to her aunt, Shelley Raylan, the only person who genuinely cared for the girl and wanted to help her. At the time, Shelley was 51 years old and working as a sales agent. Over the years, Shelley has been heartbroken as she watches her older sister, Beth's life spiral out of control. While she was unable to save Beth from addiction, she felt it was her responsibility to step in and support Christina. She had always loved her niece and couldn't bear the thought of strangers raising her. She was both kind-hearted and financially stable. Help her have enough ability to bring a good future for Christina. So Christina moved to the quiet suburbs of Danbury, Connecticut. Here, the little girl finally got to live in a stable environment and not be abandoned. Shelley is the caretaker and acts as a mother figure to the little girl. They quickly came to understand and bond with each other. Over time, Christina started to move past the traumatic memories of living with her addicted mother, who often had dealers visiting daily. Sadly, to satisfy her addiction, Christina's biological mother, Beth, did not hesitate to sell her body, and all of this was witnessed by the little girl herself. In September 1989, Shelley enrolled Christina in a prestigious private school, known as one of the best and most expensive in the city. Shelley wasn't concerned about the cost. Her only goal was to give Christina the best opportunities. One of the reasons for choosing a private school was the higher level of security it offered compared to public schools. In a private school mainly for children of wealthy and well-off families, the environment was more controlled, security was also higher. At the same time, students here had to meet high standards. Her biggest goal was to protect Christina, keep her away from negative influences and bad people. At her new school, Christina quickly adapted and made friends. She was beautiful, kind, and easygoing, was well-liked. Thanks to Shelley, many good qualities in her were gradually revealed, traits that had previously been hidden by her biological parents' indifference. Her life began to change for the better, and she achieved many successes. It had been 9 months since she moved in with her Aunt Shelley, and it seemed the traumatic memories of her past were finally fading. She was recovering from the years of abuse. She quickly integrated with her new classmates and even joined the cheerleading team. Eventually, she rose to the position of captain, becoming a confident young woman. Despite her success, Christina became increasingly depressed. Shelley was determined to find out why her niece was in this state. She explained that all the other children at her private school already had their own computers. They used the internet to gain knowledge and learn information. She also wanted a computer and asked her Aunt Shelley to buy her one. Although she had felt years of indifference from her biological parents and had no intention of reconnecting with them, she deeply wanted to communicate with her older sister, Kosa, who was 19 years old and living in Japan. Christina also believed that having a computer would greatly benefit her education. With internet access, she could quickly find information to help with her studies. This reasoning convinced Shelley, and Shelley decided to buy she a computer. Overjoyed, Christina immediately set up an account to use chat platforms like Odnoklassniki. She used a fake nickname instead of her real name, but uploaded her actual photos. However, she lied about her age. Although she was only 13 at the time, she looked older and appeared more mature than her peers. She claimed online that she was already an adult. After creating her profile, on the very same day, a guy with the nickname Clips reached out to her. They quickly started chatting. Being inexperienced with online communication, the girl acted as she normally would in real life, calm and friendly. It seemed that her new online friend appealed to her, and they soon became closer to each other. After purchasing the computer, Shelley noticed that Christina was spending more and more time online. She began to worry, feeling that Christina was becoming increasingly disconnected from real life. She was aware of the dangers the internet posed, but did not know how to deal with them. She thought that imposing strict control would be too extreme. She had spoken to Christina several times, reminding her niece not to interact with strangers or do anything unsafe. Christina reassured Shelley, insisting that little girl only communicated with people she knew, other children from private school, and avoided strangers or suspicious individuals. Shelley trusted Christina very much. She is often curious, but always avoids directly interfering in her niece's private life. Instead, she would walk into Christina's room, glance at the screen, and distract her niece with casual questions. Each time, she noticed that Christina was chatting with friends from school, which reassured her. However, Christina began chatting online more and more with a young man. Their relationship began with a simple question, "How are you?" but quickly progressed to exchanging personal photos. Christina was nervous that her online friend might stop talking to her if he discovered her real age, as she had told him she was 16. Their conversations grew more personal and eventually crossed into a deeper, more intimate level. One evening, Shelley noticed that Christina had locked herself in her room. She seemed to be chatting online, and Shelley began to worry that something was wrong. Shelley was concerned about how withdrawn she had become from real life. It seemed like all her free time was spent on the internet. Christina no longer drew, hung out with friends, or met people in person, except for her weekly walks around the local shopping center every Friday after training. Shelley worried that her warnings were not working. That evening, Shelley knocked on the door to talk to her, expressing concern about her condition. However, as usual, Christina just said she was talking to her friends and refused to open the door. In fact, Christina was texting Clips at the time. Before going to bed, he messaged her, saying he wanted to meet her in person and would come to see her on May 17, 2002. This message excited Christina because everything happened so quickly and was so new to her. She was eager to meet him, but knew her Aunt Shelley would disapprove. Shelley had always warned her about the dangers of talking to strangers online, and had warned her many times about the possible consequences. But Christina felt differently. She believed everything would turn out fine, and began dreaming about the future. She thought that this young man could be the love of her life, and had shared it with her friends. While many people meet online and build genuine relationships, there are also major risks. Behind the perfect online profile could be a bad and dangerous person, a criminal who uses social network to lure innocent victims into a trap. Christina was aware of these dangers, but chose to follow her heart. She was determined to meet Clips no matter what. Christina planned to meet him on May 17. She had told Shelley beforehand that after cheerleading practice, she would go to the mall with some friends. Shelley was happy to hear this because she had been worried that Christina might have problems if was too absorbed in the virtual world. She was relieved that Christina seemed to be reconnecting with the real world. However, in reality, Christina was planning to meet her online friend. As the day of the meeting approached, Christina anxiously awaited the day, continuing to hide the truth about her plans. She wasn't bothered by the fact that Clips, her online friend, never shared his real name or showed his face in photos. He introduces himself as a healthy young man and a basketball player. Christina herself is also healthy, but looks more mature than her age. Thanks to their common interests, the two quickly find common ground in conversation. On the morning of May 17, a young man named Clips called Shelley's house. Shelley couldn't tell Christina at the time because she was at school. Later, she attended training, came home to change clothes, and got ready for a shopping trip. Shelley planned to drive her to the mall, where she was supposed to meet her friends. Since she often went shopping with her classmates, her behavior didn't seem unusual. During the drive, Shelley asked Christina about Clips. She explained that he was an athlete from a nearby school. She admitted they had met online and occasionally played games together. When Shelley asked how old he was, she said he had just turned 14. However, she didn't mention any plans to meet him in person. Shelley grew concerned and expressed her worries, but Christina reassured Shelley's, saying she wasn't planning to meet anyone and was only communicating with Clips through the game. Christina explained that she wasn't ready for a serious relationship because of her age. Shelley believed her, but couldn't shake unease about the situation. Shelley had a bad feeling. Shelley also noticed that she looked older than her actual age, appearing more like a 16 or 17 years old, and was quite attractive. This naturally raised concerns for Shelley. However, she managed to reassure Shelley's. In reality, by this point, Christina had already been sending photos to Clips almost daily. Include some pretty revealing photos. Clips was particularly thrilled by a photo of her in a cheerleader uniform. They began flirting and gradually moved on to communicating through more personal photos. Despite her young age, Christina had dated before, and as it turned out, even been intimate, so she engages in online flirting with confidence and ease. Christina's aunt, Shelley, dropped her off near the entrance to the mall around 5:40 p.m. Shelley tried to convince Christina to let her accompany her inside, as she suspected something was off and wanted to confirm that Christina was actually meeting her school friends. However, as soon as they arrived, Christina quickly jumped out of the car and pointed to a group of young people, claiming they were her friends. Shelley had no time to react or think because she was standing in the middle of the road, and there were many cars waiting behind her. Trusting Christina, she drove away, and Christina had once again tricked her. Before leaving, Shelley shouted that she would pick Christina's up at 9:00 p.m., the usual time when the stores closed. Christina tried to ask for an extra 30 minutes and suggested Shelley come at 9:30 p.m. However, she stood her ground and replied that she would arrive at 21:00 as she had said. Shelley ended up arriving a little late, at 9:10 p.m. To her surprise, Christina wasn't in the parking lot. She waited for a while but started growing anxious. She called Christina multiple times, but her niece ignored all the calls. Worried, she parked her car and approached mall security. By this time, there were very few shoppers left in the mall, but Christina still hadn't shown up. She went to the security desk, described Christina's appearance and clothing to the security guard, and said that her niece was expected to be there with friends. The security team immediately responded to the request and began checking the information, reviewing the surveillance cameras. They searched everywhere in the shopping center for Christina, but she was nowhere to be found. Shelley stayed in the mall until 9:45 p.m., waiting for her niece, but she still did not appear. Shelley called her cell phone several times, but she did not answer. Finally, Shelley decided to call the police. The police responded promptly since the case involved a minor. They arrived at the shopping center and coordinated with the security team. Police reviewed surveillance footage and checked stores that were still open, but no one in the mall saw her. Meanwhile, the police also spoke with Shelley to gather more information about her relationship with Shelley. They questioned whether the girl had run away for some reason. Shelley said their relationship was very close, like that of a mother and daughter. Christina had no mental health issues or addictions. She was an exemplary student, beautiful, athletic, and full of potential. She had a completely normal teenage life. The only difference was that she spent a lot of time on the internet. According to Shelley, she had no reason to run away. Shelley then called several of Christina's friends, whom she was supposed to meet that evening. What surprised Shelley, however, was that they had no plans to meet her at the mall that day. In fact, they said they had never gone shopping with her before. They were questioned, and their statements were verified. After school, they had all gone straight home and hadn't gone anywhere else. One of Christina's friends shared important information. Christina told her friend that she had been chatting online for months with a strange guy. She described him as a 14-year-old high school student who played sports. The friend revealed that she had planned to meet him in person for the first time that evening. This news really shocked Shelley, who had no idea about her niece's plans to meet a stranger. Shelley had often talked to Christina about the dangers of the internet. She trusted that her niece understood these risks and wouldn't make reckless decisions. She had never tried to fully monitor Christina's online activities, believing their relationship should be based on trust and fearing that strict control might upset her niece. When investigators received this information, they immediately began to identify the mysterious young man who had met Christina. During their search, detectives quickly discovered that the man was named Carlos. However, they realized that he was actually an older man, not the 14-year-old high school student he had pretended to be. The detective immediately informed Shelley of this, but she only learned the story from Christina. She recounted the incident of a phone call from Carlos, as well as Christina texting with someone she thought was a 14-year-old athlete. When she realized that Carlos might be an adult, she panicked, knowing that the dangerous things she had warned Christina about might very well come true. The investigators asked Shelley for access to Christina's computer. At that time, the person Christina was chatting with had changed their username and profile picture. To make matters worse, the messaging app she used to communicate with him was password protected. Shelley realized that such a level of security was not appropriate for casual communication with a peer. Therefore, the police had to contact the administrator of the app to request access to the account. Although this process was challenging, after 2 hours, the detectives were able to access the conversation between Christina and the person. The content of the messages shocked Shelley. It turned out that Christina had been chatting with several strange men at the same time. Christina is open to people, willing to flirt, and has had intimate relationships with several older men. She has also met several times with a younger man just for the sake of it. Through their conversations, it is clear that neither of them have any intention of building a serious relationship or getting married. They are just having fun. However, it seems that Christina does not fully reveal her true identity to people. Some people know her real age, while others think she is an adult. While reviewing Christina's chats, detectives discovered 3 suspicious accounts. 2 of them were selected for further investigation. The investigation revealed that one of the 2 individuals was Carlos, a 22-year-old man. The meeting with him on the day of her disappearance would have been their first. Naturally, he became the primary suspect. The detectives quickly discovered Carlos's residence and went there immediately. Luckily, he was at home, and they began questioning him. His behavior was suspicious. He denied any connection or communication with Christina, yet he stuttered, appeared extremely nervous, and took a long time to respond, often speaking incoherently. It was clear he was hiding something. When asked about his alibi, he started shaking visibly. Carlos claimed he had spent the previous evening at home. Despite his clear anxiety, he never confessed to being involved in Christina's disappearance, leaving the police no choice but to verify his claims. During this time, Christina was officially considered kidnapped. Investigators believe one of her internet friends may have kidnapped her and held her against her will. They needed to locate and rescue her before she was harmed. By now, she had been missing for over 18 hours. The police were aware that the critical window for finding a missing person alive is typically within the first 48 hours. Since Carlos never admitted to the kidnapping, they are forced to investigate another suspect, who is behaving suspiciously. The second suspect was a young man named Saul dos Reis. His bandaged hand immediately caught the investigators' attention, as it appeared to be a recent injury. Saul claimed he had hurt his hand the previous evening while working on a car hood. He also claimed that he did not know Christina, although detectives had discovered that they had been texting each other. His nervous behavior and his inconsistent testimonies led the police to suspect that he was hiding something, much like Carlos. However, due to the lack of concrete evidence against Saul, the police were forced to release him. Saul was the man Christina had been secretly meeting for intimate relations with over the past few months. Her Friday shopping trips with her classmates were actually a cover for these meetings, which took place in the car with Saul. Unfortunately, the investigation into both suspects, Saul and Carlos, did not lead the police to Christina, and time was running out. The police discovered that Saul's parents were living in Brazil, making him a high risk of attempting to flee the country. As a result, they decided to arrest and detain Saul. Saul was brought in for questioning again that same day, under the pretense that he had lied during his initial interview with the police. They showed him the messages and revealed that his secret relationship with Christina had been discovered. They began asking leading questions such as Christina's age, since she was a 13-year-old girl, so exchanging sensitive photos with her could also be considered harassment. Saul was concerned about this, but the police suspected that he was hiding a much more serious crime. The investigators employed several typical tactics, and using uncomfortable questions to pressure him. Eventually, he confessed that he had indeed met Christina. He explained that on Friday evening, they walked together through the shopping center, and they chatted happily together. Later, he suggested they spend time alone in his car in the parking lot, and she agreed. According to Saul's confession, they engaged in consensual intimacy in the car. When the police questioned him about Christina's age, Saul said that he thought she was an adult. He claimed that in their online conversations, she had clearly stated that she was of legal age, and the police had also confirmed this detail during the investigation. However, she was only 13 years old. In real life, she looked much older than she actually was. She wore heavy makeup and dressed like an adult. Saul insisted he didn't know her real age and expressed disappointment that she had misled him. Detectives now have enough evidence to confront Saul. However, he maintains his innocence. Saul said that after having an intimate relationship, he and Christina broke up. According to Saul, she was planning to meet someone else, and he simply went home. Saul, who has a wife and children, lives nearby and works in a restaurant. He says his home is near where he met Christina. Following this interrogation, the police grew even more suspicious of Saul. They believed he might have been the last person to see Christina alive. The investigators suspected he was not telling the truth. Although he did not confess, he was arrested and charged with using the internet for corrupt activities. A full day had passed since Christina's disappearance, yet there was still no sign of her. Detectives re-interrogated Carlos because they believed he might know something. It was possible that Christina had met him after meeting Saul. Carlos's biggest issue was that he was aware she was a minor. In their messages, she had told him she was 16 years old. Despite this, Carlos still agreed to meet her. Their interactions included messages, flirting, and the exchange of photographs, some of which were explicit. In this interrogation, he appeared nervous. The investigators tried to exploit his unstable state to get answers, but he refused to cooperate once again. 36 hours had passed since Christina went missing, and there were still no leads. The police had detained 2 suspects, Carlos and Saul, but both remained silent. Volunteers and police searched for more than a day, but still could not find any trace of Christina. By this point, the FBI had joined the investigation. Agents decided to administer polygraph tests to both suspects, Carlos and Saul. When asked if they knew what had happened to Christina, the polygraph indicated that both Carlos and Saul were lying. Their behavior only made investigators more suspicious. 40 hours after Christina's disappearance, Saul finally agreed to cooperate with the police, leading them to her. He took them to his neighborhood, leading them between 2 houses to a drain pipe behind the buildings, where Christina's body was found. He admitted that he accidentally strangled her during an intimate relationship. He said that it had been consensual, but that things had gotten out of hand. When she regained consciousness, he panicked and became confused. He attempted CPR but was unsuccessful. Instead of calling emergency services, he disposed of her body in the drainage pipe, hoping to avoid punishment. The investigation revealed that Carlos had intimate relations with Christina earlier that evening, but before Saul, not after. Carlos, for his involvement with a minor, was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Saul, however, denied any wrongdoing. However, the prosecution found him guilty of second-degree murder, assault, and corruption of a minor. No one believed his testimony about accidentally strangling Christina. They argued he killed Christina out of jealousy after discovering her prior interaction with Carlos. The court found Saul guilty, sentencing him to 30 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tammy Epperson. Tammy Epperson was an attractive woman who had a modeling career but left the industry due to substance abuse and spent her life on Skid Row in Los Angeles. By the age of 30, She was addicted to drugs. However, Tammy recognized her problem and was determined to change her life. She decided to enter a rehabilitation program, and by 2000, at the age of 38, she had successfully turned her life around. Despite a long battle with addiction, Tammy was able to regain control and break free from the vicious cycle of substance abuse. She had completely overcome her bad habits and started a new chapter in her life. She decided to help others so that they too could find opportunities to improve their lives. Tammy lived in Banton Plaza, a community designed to support people looking for a fresh start. The state-funded facility serves as a safe haven for those who are beginning to recover from addiction, as well as those who have succeeded. For many, it becomes a place of protection from the outside world. The area is fenced and guarded by 24-hour security, and visitors are required to sign a logbook upon entry. Unfortunately, these security measures were not enough to deal with what happened next. Tammy lived in a small studio on the ground floor, where she was attacked by an attacker inside the building. When police arrived at the scene at around 9 p.m. on November 13, 2000. At the crime scene in Tammy's room, all the furniture was destroyed. Glassware, ceramics, and appliances were all smashed and scattered on the floor. Tammy's personal belongings were thrown onto the bed, suggesting that the attacker may have been looking for something. Police suspect the motive may have been theft or drug-related activity. Tammy was lying on the floor, her face severely disfigured. Police considered the possibility that she had been abused based on the nature of her injuries and the state of her clothing. The small space of the room, combined with the brutality of the attacker, left police stunned. According to police, the perpetrator targeted Tammy, slamming her against the wall multiple times, causing serious injuries. Tragically, the attacker did not stop there, continuing to beat her once she was on the floor. He used whatever he could find as a weapon. The attacker violently attacked Tammy and then destroyed everything around her. This would have created a lot of noise, but none of the neighbors reported anything to the police during the incident. The police noted that the level of decomposition of the body indicated that she had been dead for at least a day before the police arrived. However, all the neighbors claimed that they had not heard anything, which seems unlikely given the poor soundproofing of the apartment. A close friend of Tammy's had previously reported to the police that he had not been able to contact her for several hours and was starting to worry. Eventually, he heard others saying that Tammy might be dead. Out of concern, he contacted the police. The police took his claims to heart and decided to send officers to check on Tammy in her apartment. Her once beautiful face was unrecognizable due to disfigurement. A large screwdriver, discovered under Tammy's shoulder, was likely the weapon used. Deep circular holes in her face led forensic experts to determine that this tool had been used in the attack. One of the police officers quickly speculated that the attack may have been motivated by Tammy's beauty. She was very attractive, and it seemed as if someone had wanted to ruin that beauty. The attack had targeted her face and neck, causing severe stab wounds and cuts that would have left her with no chance of survival. A forensic expert was called to the scene to examine evidence in the apartment. His goal was to analyze the situation accurately, reconstruct the sequence of events, and piece together a comprehensive understanding of the crime scene. He spent 7 hours working in Tammy's apartment. This was followed by many more hours dedicated to analyzing, recording, processing, and organizing all the information gathered. A significant amount of blood was found in the bathroom, while the body was found in the living room. It is likely that the attack occurred while she was in the bathroom. The attacker then dragged Tammy into the living room. Once there, they laid her on the floor and continued to torture her, ultimately leading to her death. Forensic experts were faced with a major challenge because the attacker used a variety of murder weapons: a stool, then a vase, and finally a lamp. All of these items were broken and stained with blood, and were left at the crime scene, suggesting they could contain vital evidence and DNA that could help identify the killer. All of the materials were collected and sent to a lab for thorough analysis. What was particularly shocking was that the loud noises went unnoticed by residents of the apartment complex. During the investigation of Tammy's small apartment, police discovered several key pieces of evidence in the sink, including a rag that likely contained the attacker's blood. Police also found a water bottle with a red fingerprint and a trash can containing several tissues with similar marks. In addition to the attack, Tammy had been abused, as evidenced by her disheveled clothing and underwear. This was confirmed by a forensic expert. The forensic expert took samples from Tammy's body to extract the DNA of the murder suspect. Due to the nature of the crime, the police began searching for Tammy's relatives. Inside her apartment, they found several framed photos of her modeling career and an educational certificate, along with documents about her addiction treatment. There was no sign of any family, friends, or boyfriends in her belongings. According to acquaintances, Tammy had indeed overcome her bad habits and was living a normal life. However, she still had many suspicious people around her who were struggling with addiction. Not only did she overcome her addiction, but she also got a respectable job. Tammy became an office manager at a Hollywood phone service that catered to celebrities. She also volunteered at a nearby church, where she supported people struggling with addiction. She took on the role because she wanted to help people in need. Because the attacker intended to harm her appearance, and because she was very attractive, the police suspected that the attacker could be Tammy's rejected lover or a secret admirer. Soon after, the police received information about a potential suspect. A resident of the apartment complex informed the police that the attacker could be Ronald Sims. He had a history of serious drug addiction and was still struggling with his own problems. Ronald had previously dated Tammy, but their relationship ended when she overcame her addiction, while he was also struggling to overcome his. Despite this, they remained in touch and maintained a friendly relationship. Tammy believed that Ronald needed her support, so she offered him advice and guidance based on her own experiences. Police quickly contacted Ronald as a potential suspect in the murder. However, he denied any wrongdoing, claiming he had a friendly relationship with Tammy and that they had never fought. He insisted that he could never hurt her. Ronald shared a darker story. He said that Tammy had met a man in her church counseling sessions who had become a stalker. To ensure her safety, Ronald felt the need to keep an eye on her. This stalker was Troy Powell, a 32-year-old man who was on probation after serving time for previous crimes. The three were friends and often socialized together, attending church together. However, it was felt that Troy had romantic feelings for Tammy. From their first meeting, he began pursuing her, showering her with flowers and stuffed animals. He would wait for her in his pickup truck almost every day, offering to give her rides. During the citywide bus driver strike, Tammy would occasionally ride in his truck, though she usually rode with someone else. Ronald knew Troy struggled with addiction, and Tammy considered him potentially dangerous, which is why she rarely took him up on his offers. She told Ronald multiple times that she only sought Troy's help occasionally. However, Troy misunderstood her as being willing to rely on him and believed that he had a chance with her. In reality, Tammy felt obligated to help him overcome his addiction, but had no desire for a romantic relationship. She gave him advice and support while keeping her distance. She made it clear to him that she was not interested in anything more than friendship. Despite this, Troy became increasingly persistent, and his obsession with Tammy became more evident. As a result, Tammy tried to avoid close contact with him. Ronald believed that Troy was involved in her murder. Troy was aggressive, short-tempered, and obsessive towards her. In Tammy's apartment, the police found a disturbing phone book containing records of many calls from Troy. The notes detailed the times he called, the length of time they talked, Many of these notes indicated that Tammy had asked him to stop calling her. Despite this, Troy continued to contact her on the same day and for a long time. Eventually, one of Troy's acquaintances informed Ronald that Troy had confessed to the murder. Ronald then reported this to the police. According to witness statements, Troy stated that he had visited Tammy. They had talked, but then they had an argument. In a fit of rage, he said he had killed her. Troy was missing and may have escaped. The police checked the logs of Tammy's residence and discovered that Troy had entered the building on the day of the murder and left just hours later. As Troy leaves the building, he is asked about Tammy. As residents are required to accompany visitors, Troy smirked and claimed that Tammy was resting, and the guards believed him and allowed him to leave. He was the last person to visit Tammy's apartment. That same day, Ronald said he had plans to work with Tammy at the church. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer, which was unusual. The church confirmed that Tammy had not shown up. The next morning, Ronald went to her work, but she was still absent. He was struggling with substance abuse at the time and was not allowed into her apartment. However, he noticed Troy's red pickup truck parked outside, which made him worried. He continued to try calling Tammy, but she still did not answer, so he decided to call the police. Police pieced together the events of that tragic day and concluded that the night before the murder, Tammy left church with Troy. They stopped at a store where he bought a Bible. Troy convinced her that he needed help and advice with his addiction. Tammy felt she couldn't say no to him, which led him to her home. Police investigated Troy Powell's criminal history and discovered a long list of convictions, including serious offenses such as drug use and distribution, theft, and abuse. He had previously served time in prison for assaulting another woman he was stalking, who survived. Troy was clearly a danger to society, especially to women. Despite his criminal record, he appeared attractive to women. Police were able to locate Troy's vehicle, a red pickup truck with a description. Ronald gave a detailed account, saying that he had seen the car that Troy had used to meet Tammy on the day of the massacre. The police had a breakthrough when one of the patrol officers spotted an unfamiliar car in the hotel parking lot. The patrol officer identified it as a bright red pickup truck. He checked the license plate number and confirmed that it was Troy's car. The police were notified and quickly arrived to arrest Troy. They stood outside the hotel, waiting for Troy to drive away. Troy finally showed up and he was arrested. The detainee identified himself as Charles Vanoy, and after examining the documents, they confirmed that he was telling the truth. Despite this, the authorities decided to detain him and investigate the red marks on his hat. He explained that his friend Troy had given him the car the day before, and that he had taken it that night along with a jacket, a camera, and other items. Charles and Troy were former cellmates and had kept in touch after their release. The police quickly searched the hotel room and found a camera with film. After being developed, the photos showed Tammy, Charles, and Troy together. Charles said that they had all met at a church where Tammy supported people recovering from substance abuse problems. The DNA test took longer than expected, but eventually confirmed that the blood found on the baseball cap did not belong to Tammy. The police decided to question Charles, who eventually revealed that he had important information, but wanted protection from prosecution in exchange for it. The police agreed to his terms. Charles claimed that Troy had confessed to killing Tammy, who never returned his feelings. Troy gave Charles the pickup truck and planned to escape from the police. Charles Vanoy claimed that he had nothing to do with the case. However, during questioning, he provided details about Tammy's death that only the criminals or witnesses would know. It is unclear whether he learned this information from Troy or if he was present at the crime scene. As a result, Charles was forced to cooperate with the investigation. He informed the police that Troy was supposed to call him at 7 p.m. that same day. Charles agreed to assist the police in apprehending the killer. Troy then called Charles, and during that time, the police were able to locate location Troy. He was arrested while in a hotel. His DNA was found on Tammy's body after the attack, and multiple fingerprints linked him to various items. Tammy's blood was also found on his clothing, leading Troy to be held responsible for the crime. In his confession, Troy admitted to killing Tammy but claimed that he was insane at the time. He said he had mental health issues and had not taken his prescribed medication for a long time due to financial difficulties. Troy was charged with premeditated murder, burglary, abuse, and torture, giving the prosecution a strong case for the death penalty. However, Troy denied responsibility. He claimed that he suffered from a mental disorder that made him unfit to stand trial. A psychiatric evaluation was therefore ordered, which ultimately determined that he was sane during the attack. Troy recounted the events of the case in detail to his friend Charles, who later became a key witness for the prosecution. Troy attributed his actions to childhood trauma, saying that he had suffered from abuse by his alcoholic father throughout his childhood. He argued that this had led to a psychological problem that caused him to react violently whenever he was rejected by a woman. A key moment in the hearing was Troy's testimony in his defense. He admitted that he could have been the killer but claimed that he could not remember anything. He also believed that Tammy was still alive when he left the apartment, arguing that the murder was not planned. One of the most shocking allegations from the prosecution was that Troy tortured Tammy for a long time before she died. The jury found Troy Powell guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to death. He is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison, awaiting execution,